Rarely had so few words sent a hand of ice running up my spine and birthed a writhing scorpion in my belly. Zheng stood haloed by the early evening light flooding in through the kitchen and utility room windows, bathing her long coat and heavy boots in orange firelight, making her red chocolate skin and dark thatch of hair glow with inner heat. And glow she did, through the undeniable savage glee on her face, the deep satisfaction in her purring exhalation, and the physical joy in the flex of her aching muscles. She was in afterglow. For a long moment I couldn't speak, and not solely because of the vile cloacal stench clinging to Zheng from whatever mad places she'd been sleeping all week. I was overwhelmed by rotten worms crawling through my veins and a band of steel expanding inside my chest, rusty hooks buried deep in the muscle of my heart. My throat was stopped up with black acid tar and my brain was full of angry wasps. Zheng's joy flickered and faltered with a twitch of her eyebrows. I was too obvious. "Shaman," she rumbled. "Like you." I cleared my throat but barely felt myself echo Zheng's words. Had to pull myself together. The others were clattering down the stairs behind me, they'd be in the kitchen in moments. Rain could read me like an open book even when I was trying to be subtle, she'd see this a mile away, like a forest fire. "Like you," I repeated. Zheng had met somebody like her. "Zheng, what does that mean? Like you in what way?" Savage enjoyment ripped back onto Zheng's face, revealing her razor-sharp shark teeth clenched in a skull's grin. Normally I loved that look on her. It stole my breath and set a squirming in the pit of my belly. But now I felt like a viper was biting my guts from the inside, filling me with venom. Zheng's pleasure, respect, and joy aimed at somebody else. The others entered the kitchen behind me at last, but I couldn't get a hold of myself. Evelyn clacked along with her walking stick while Rain squeezed my shoulder and nodded to Zheng. Preem waited by the door as Lazi and Tenny skipped in, half wrapped in each other. But then Tenny let out a loud trilling noise of olfactory offense, waving her tentacles up and down in a wave-like fan as if to waft away a bad smell. She pulled Lazi with her as she retreated through the door again, dragging Pastel Poncho back with a clutch of black tentacles like a scene from a bad horror movie, made farcical by Lazi going "boo-whoop." All other complaints were stilled by the religious intensity in Zheng's voice. "A hunter like me, shaman," she was purring with the throat of a tiger. "A demon dredged from the darkest seas and crammed into human flesh. We tracked each other for days across brick and concrete, the equal of any deep forest. There are so many hidden places in any city, places to fight, places to hide. It has taken me the last 2 days just to lose the tail so I may return home." Her voice dropped to a hiss of awe and wonder. "Awe, such skills. I almost could not escape." "Shaman, you cannot know." "I suppose I can't," I murmured. I did my best to hide my physical reaction, clutching my heart tightly and trying not to let the discomfort show on my face. I even forced myself to uncross my arms, though a moment later I found I'd crossed them again, subconsciously. Couldn't help it, closing myself off with a gesture. But pneumosomatic flesh told my secrets to all those capable of seeing. I just prayed that Rain didn't get the bright idea to slip on those special 3D glasses Evelyn had made. The trilobe reactor in my abdomen had shed a control rod to ramp up energy production, and I didn't care enough to stop it. My tentacles had increased from 2 to 4, first reaching toward Zheng but then clenching up tight around my own torso, the armor of self-embrace. My gums itched with a desire to sprout rows of sharp teeth and I wanted to twist my throat into a screech. Zheng didn't seem to notice. That made it worse. I was jealous. "There's a demon host out there," Evelyn snapped as soon as the opening presented itself. "In Sherrowford, in the city. Right here in," she broke off and coughed, grimacing as she waved a hand in front of her nose. "Ugh, bloody hell. That's coming from you. What the hell is that?" Rain blinked several times, the stench was so bad it made her eyes water. "Oh, the rotten cow carcasses left out in the sun, by the smell of her. Stink. Stinky." Tenny yelled through the door from the front room, a noise like somebody shouting through an electric fan. A small canine whine joined her. Whistle did not approve of the odor either. "It's really bad," Lozzie added, giggling like the little maniac she was. For once, her laughter didn't help me. "Yes, little wizard," Zheng purred with a toothy grin. She strode into the kitchen proper, rolling her neck and reaching for a chair. "No," Preem intoned, sharp and sudden. Zheng flicked her head to meet Preem's gaze. "Filthy," Preem expanded. "Wash hands or touch nothing." The staring contest lasted less than a second. Zheng broke first, looking away with resigned defeat. She gave up on the chair and rotated her shoulders, working out the kinds of kinks that can only come from sleeping on hard, cold ground. "Yes, wizard. A demon host. Like me. And what's so special about this one?" Evelyn went on quickly, holding her nose. "You killed all the cult zombies in that house where they did their ritual. What's different about this? Why have you been gone so long? And what happened to Orange Juice's skin freak?" Zheng let out a sound like the heart of a forge furnace, narrowing sharp eyes at Evelyn. As she did, Rain tilted her head in obvious warning. I felt a pair of small, grasping hands worm their way into the fabric of my hoodie from behind Sevens, almost as if on cue. She squeezed against me like I was a curtain wall between her and Zheng. Her hot little head pressed against my shoulder as she peered around me. "Wizards," Zheng growled contempt at Evelyn. "Always with the details. The what, the when, the where. Always making new boxes. Always." Zheng broke off and glanced at Preem again. Preem hadn't said a thing. She hadn't even moved. But Zheng rolled her eyes and curled her upper lip in distaste. "Answer her," I said, my voice about 3 shades too harsh. I cleared my throat and mentally slapped myself. "Please, Zheng. This is important." Zheng tilted her head at me with a curious twitch in her eyebrows. "Shaman. It's important." I repeated, a bit shrill. "You can't tell us there's somebody like you out there and refuse to explain." "Yes, you killed plenty of zombies before," Evelyn repeated herself too, shuffling over to the table. She nudged a chair out with her walking stick. Perhaps demonstrating her mutual contempt for Zheng, she sat down heavily, when Zheng was still not allowed to, stilled by our maid's strict instructions. "What's different about one more?" Zheng stared at Evelyn, then broke into another giant, toothy grin, her irritation forgotten in the rapture of recent memory. "Those things were not like me, wizard. They were saplings. Single digits old at best. Mad decaying. They were enslaved," I said, a cold lump in my throat. "Yes, shaman." Zheng roared for me. "But what I've dueled in this city was no zombie, no discarded shell filled with unwilling spark. One like me, a hunter in free flesh. No slave." Rain let out a low whistle. "Ah oh." Lozzie went, clearly not taking this at all seriously. Tenny echoed her, a fluttery, oh, coming from the front room, followed by a much quieter, stinky. "We can hardly talk," I said with a tut. "Zheng is free and so is Preem." "Preem is Preem," Evelyn said without missing a beat. "We raised her with love." She paused and started to blush, then threw her arms wide so hard she almost brained Rain with her walking stick. "What? We did. I defy anybody to define it differently. Even you." She waved her walking stick past me. I glanced back to see Lozzie peeking around the door frame, a giggle hidden behind the end of one sleeve. Preem may be almost unique among demon hosts. So there. And Zheng, well, Heather vouches for Zheng. "You think we should all be bound, wizard?" Zheng rumbled, low and dangerous. Evelyn blanched but managed to meet her eyes. "You should never have been enslaved in the first place. Zheng was treated as human when she was brought to our reality." "Treated with respect," I said gently. I'd never explained Zhang's exact past to Evelyn. That was Zhang's business. Maybe it's not as rare as you think, Evie. Evelyn huffed and waved us to shut up. Zhang. This is something made by Edward. An unbound demon host, in a human corpse, walking the streets of Sherrowford. She shook her head. He can't be that desperate, he can't be, that's insane. Ha! Zhang barked a derisive laugh, like a fresh log thrown into a fire. That worm would never free a slave. It's not in him. Besides, he could never control something like that, not unshackled and free. You should have seen her, wizard. She is glorious. She. I hissed under my breath. And look what she left on my flesh. Without warning for sensitive constitutions, Zhang grabbed the hem of her own baggy, shapeless, gray jumper, and yanked it upward. My eyes almost popped out of their sockets as she revealed inch after inch of rippling abdominal muscle. Her bare chocolate-red skin was still marked by the winding, matted, indecipherable mass of her black binding tattoos, the layers of spell that had kept her bound and rebound for centuries, now punctuated by gaps like crop circles where I'd removed enough of it to free her. She pulled her jumper upward, exposing her iron-hard belly, the base of her rib cage, and more than any of us was prepared to see, certainly not in the kitchen. Evelyn coughed so hard it was like a steam explosion. Rain was laughing. Lozzie squealed with both hands over her mouth. Sevens made a weird little "geark" noise into my shoulder. I was staring at the bruises. 6 bruises were visible on Zhang's abdomen and chest, with the shadows of several more lurking up on her shoulders and collarbone, too far beneath the jumper for even her wild display to show off to us. They blossomed like dark flowers beneath her skin, some of them days old, turning yellow and green with the healing process, but others were fresh, shining purple and black. One bruise at the base of her rib still showed the outline of a row of knuckles, small and neat. Knuckle marks. On her flesh. I could not have stopped any of these blows. She was raving on, showing all her teeth in a grin of pride. I tasted bile. I gave as good as I got, but I could not stop her. I could not. Rain started a slow clap, shaking her head and grinning too. Evelyn cleared her throat again and muttered, "Put those away, bloody hell. I thought you were supposed to heal super fast." Rain said. "Didn't you break both your legs saving Heather that one time?" "Ah, little wolf, you remember well," Zhang purred, still flashing all of us. "But these wounds were earned. I deserve to feel their length and breadth. They heal at your rate, your monkey rate. There are good things about you monkeys, things worth being here for. Like these." Zhang just laughed. She turned to me with a grin like a teenage admirer showing off bruises and scrapes from some madcap attempt to impress the object of her affections. She kept the jumper pulled up, presenting her trophies. But I had nothing to say. "Shaman." Zhang rumbled after a heartbeat, grin flickering off. "Hey, hold up a sec," Rain said, vaguely skeptical. "I seem to recall the first time we met, I hit you with a baseball bat like, oh, maybe 4 or 5 times." 6, Zhang answered instantly. "You did well, little wolf. You let those ones slow heal too." Zhang nodded, dipping her head to Rain in a gesture of respect. Rain nodded back with momentary surprise. "Yes, I'm sure your dueling scars are all very impressive," Evelyn drawled. "But what you're saying is there's an unbound demon host who is your equal. Just wandering around Sherrowford. Hunting," Zhang purred. She was hunting. Zhang finally dropped her jumper again, which was a relief for the rest of us, in various different ways except for Lozzie, who let out a disappointed "aw." My beautiful demon host flexed her shoulders again, which I now understood was her trying to work out the stiff pain of the bruises she was refusing to heal. "Hunting you?" Evelyn snapped. Zhang shook her head. Uranjua's skin man was her prey. We hunted the same game. She beat me there, but we met over the kill. I surprised her in the act of devouring the remains. From then, she hunted me, and I hunted her. We clashed twice. And then you didn't kill her. Acid and spite. It took me a moment to realize why everyone was suddenly looking at me. Evelyn with a frown, Rain with surprise, Preem's head rotating on her neck to stare at me with milk-white eyes. I even felt Sevens looking up at me from down by my own shoulder. Only then did I realize I'd spoken. The words had slipped out beneath my notice, barbed and hooked with sarcasm. I sounded like Evelyn. One of my hands moved to cover my mouth in mortified shock, but I forced it back down. I was committed now. A twisted, bitter serpent in my chest bid me to stare right back at Zheng. Zheng watched me with dark eyes. She didn't answer, but went very still, all except for the way she tilted her head slightly, like a big cat sizing up something that was neither prey nor packmate. I felt my throat bob as I swallowed, fighting off the need to cower like a mouse before a rattlesnake. Unfamiliar bitterness kept me standing straight even as I cursed myself for a complete fool. What was I doing? She fought another zombie. I screamed at myself. So what? I was acting like an emotionally constipated 13-year-old with an unrequited crush, something I'd never done back when I was actually 13 years old. Why couldn't I just say it out loud, tell her I was jealous? This was Zheng. She loved me to a disturbing and dangerous degree, so what was I afraid of? This was nothing, somebody she'd fought, a zombie. A zombie she clearly admired. I felt Sevens gently bite my shoulder blade through my hoodie, just a touch with her teeth, like a dog who didn't intend to break skin. Did she know? Could she tell? No, shaman, Zheng said eventually, unsmiling. I could not defeat her. I swallowed because I knew I was in deep. I'd given the game away, drawn my heart out to sit bloody and beating on my sleeve. Zheng stared me down, hard and sharp, like a flint knife. I'd been jealous before, of course, and just as equally without proper cause. Driven by social maladjustment and lack of experience and pure projection, back before Rain and I had officially become a couple, I'd briefly thought Twill was a serious contender for her affections. I'd compared myself with the werewolf's effortless porcelain beauty and implied supernatural exoticism. I'd felt just as immature and stupid back then. My reaction this time was different. It implied things about myself that I didn't like. I'd never met this zombie she'd fought, but she had clearly loved the experience. My 4 currently manifested tentacles were twitching and flexing, aching to reach over to Zheng and do what? I was restrained only by the terrible stench of her right then, and the fact she was probably a walking biohazard. I wanted to hug her, roughly, too hard for her wounds, squeeze her tight and make her ache. I wanted to peel back her clothes and jab at those bruises to see how she would react, to inflict a little pain. If I'd been alone I would have put a hand over my mouth at that thought. What am I thinking? That's horrible. Heather, no. I didn't have the right to think that way. I had 3 girlfriends. Well, 2. 2.5. Whatever it wasn't simply monogamy. I didn't have a right to tell Zheng what she could and couldn't do. Did I? Instead I forced down a deep breath and nodded to Zheng, pretending I was just shocked. You didn't win. Yes, you didn't win, I squeezed out. Didn't convince anybody, let alone Zheng. It's just she must have been quite incredible to do that much damage to you. I failed utterly at purging the scorn from my voice. Perhaps next time I will, shaman, Zheng answered, turning her head one way and then the other, examining me carefully. And I will bring you her head. I cringed. At least that was real enough. No, please, you don't have to bring me anybody's head, Zheng. Please, that's not what I want. Zheng grunted. All her joyous good humor was gone. I'd ruined it. I was just so worried about you. I blurted out. And now you come back raving about having fun. For all we knew, Orange came back to finish you off and I wasn't there to clean you up this time, or Edward captured you and hollowed you out, or you decided to go back to Siberia or something. That was a low blow. Zheng blinked, slowly. I was worried. Okay. I finished, putting too much emphasis into my voice. Now you know how we all felt, Evelyn muttered. I grimaced. Sevens did a little raspy purr into my back. I was a coward, covering the truth with another truth. A different truth. I said nothing of the jealousy. Zheng stared at me another second, then broke into a reborn grin. My heart creaked with rotten relief. I am here, shaman. I would not leave you. Well. I blurted out. I'm going to buy you a bloody mobile phone. And you're to carry it. Everywhere. Zheng blinked once like a big cat rolling in the sun, eyes drifting past me to Sevens, who was still peering around my side. Zheng tilted her head. You've been out, shaman. Yes, well, I huffed. While you were hunting, we had kind of an experience. I spent a night outside. It's a long story, I'll tell you later. My eyes were drawn with sudden magnetic pull to the open door of the magical workshop. My squid skull mask sat on the table, pointed right into the kitchen as if watching us with blank eye sockets. I felt a deep need to walk over to it and drop it over my own head, to hide from difficult feelings, to wear the face of what I felt inside. Abyssal things and outsiders didn't have to deal with simple romantic jealousy. Or did they? Zheng purred. She tilted her head to follow Sevens as the little blood goblin slid further behind my back, until only one black and red eye showed around my flank. She poked her tongue out at Zheng, just a quick flicker, but enough to make Zheng tilt her head the other way in response. Can we please not keep getting so far off topic that we get lost in the woods? Evelyn grumbled, tapping the side of the kitchen table with her walking stick. She waved her other hand in front of her nose again. This is important information and I need it all. But you smell like an open cesspit and you need hosing down with bleach. Please. Sorry, Evie, I sighed, trying to pull myself back together. Wizard, I have told you all that matters, said Zheng. You told me you found a demon host eating the remains of something spawned by the fat orange juice man. That is a nightmare. What does that even mean? Was she physically eating it? The whole thing, Zheng grunted. I let her finish. Rain laughed and slapped her knee. Evelyn put her face in one hand and looked like she wanted to scream. That may not have been optimal, I said gently. Means she was one hungry hippo, Rain said. Evelyn gave her a look that could have made concrete crumble. She made the kill, Zheng said. She earned the right. Zheng bared her teeth and growled low in her throat. She ate it. Not the other way around. And you have a lot to learn about germ theory, apparently, Evelyn said. Did you speak with her? I asked, my throat tightening at the thought of Zheng swapping words with this unknown demon out there in the city. Yes, I sighed at myself privately, I'm sure they whispered sweet nothings in between punches. Then again, maybe they had done. Zheng was like that. She shook her head. We sized each other up, shaman. We communicated, but we did not speak. We needed only fists and feet, and the poetry of the hunt across many days. There is a deeper communication in the hunt, but usually it is only one way. This time it was both ways. She drew in a great breath and let it out slowly, grinning that slow, satisfied grin again. I swallowed a mouthful of bile. How'd you lose her? Rain asked. You said you spent the last 2 days losing a tail. You didn't lead her back here, right? Zheng shot a very sharp-eyed look at Rain, her grin momentarily frozen. Would I put the shaman at risk, little wolf? Nah. Rain shook her head. I trust you. I hid in places beyond self-respect, Zheng said. So that's why you reek, Evelyn muttered. Smelly smell smell smelly. Tenny called from even further back in the front room than before. Zheng's pigsty stench was spreading. And I had helped to draw her off, Zheng continued. An unexpected companion. Oh. I said. The fox. I felt myself light up with a genuine smile, toxic jealousy briefly forgotten. Everyone else was going through some variation of frowning at either me or Zheng and repeating, the fox, like I'd spoken a foreign language. Even Tenny trilled fox from the front room. But Zheng nodded slowly at me in a moment of shared understanding. That was how I knew Zheng was home, I explained, crossing the kitchen in a hurry so I could peer out of the window and into the back garden. Seven's little hands managed to stay clinging to me, forcing us both into an awkward waddle, but I was so excited that I shook her off without thinking. I leaned over the sink, craning my neck to see if the fox was still sitting on the sun-soaked grass beneath the skies of dying orange. But the animal was gone, nowhere to be seen as I scanned the garden. The fox, I was explaining, Evie's fox. It's not my fox, Evelyn grunted. And what's it still doing in the city? Shouldn't the damn thing have gone back to Sussex? However it got here in the first place. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, Evie, I tooted, craning my neck to look along the fence. But there was no sign of the fox. She wants to help, she. Go-ao. Sevens let out a noise half malfunctioning toilet flush and half velociraptor with blocked sinuses, loud enough to make me jump and spin. Hey 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 hey, Rain was shouting. Bad Zheng. Lozzie shouted past Tenny, who was emitting a noise like a lawn mower made of feathers and turning the kitchen doorway into a wall of whirling black tentacles. Zheng had Sevens by the head. One massive hand was tangled in Seven's lank, dark locks, Zheng's long fingers holding her skull with a grip like an iron vice. Zheng peered at her with all the curious interest of a panther with a small animal pinned beneath her paws. Sevens responded with rasping and keening through her teeth, bearing those sharp little needlepoints at Zheng. She hunched her shoulders, twisting her body to present the smallest possible target, but she didn't try to pull away. She knew she was trapped. Zheng. I snapped. Zheng, stop. But Zheng ignored me. Had I irritated her, crossed some barrier earlier? She turned Seven's head one way, then the other, looking at her from both sides. Then she leaned in closer and closer, until she was inches away from Seven's face. Sevens raised both hands with her fingers hooked like claws, a herk sound rising in her throat, a rattlesnake warning through a drainpipe. Zheng sniffed her, shifted position, sniffed her again, then straightened up. Leech, Zheng grunted. HNH. It's 7 shades of sunlight, I explained. That's just a mask. A form. She's only a vampire right now. And not really. Zheng stared at Sevens and Sevens gurgled back, one long noise like a very angry lizard. Not really a bloody vampire at all, Evelyn hissed. Yellow leech, then, Zheng purred. Poor girl's gonna need her hair washed after this, Rain said. Your hands have gotta be filthy, Zheng. She's also mine, I said, with unexpected steel in my voice. Slowly, Zheng's gaze slid sideways, to meet my eyes. Sevens pulled in her grip, but Zheng's fingers were too strong to escape. Property? Zheng purred. Well, I huffed. I don't own her, if that's what you mean, but she's mine. We're close. She's a bit like you, now, Zheng. I hadn't intended to imply so much confrontation or channel so much unexplained bitterness, but Zheng seemed to accept my explanation. She turned back to Sevens, gave her one big, toothy flash, then finally let her go. But Sevens was not content to retreat and lick her wounded pride. As soon as Zheng loosened her grip, Sevens twisted like a ferret, gathering herself in a crouch and bouncing up with ankles like springs. The balls of her feet left the floor for one glorious airborne moment as she sank her teeth into Zheng's hand. Yun. Zheng grunted, actually surprised by how fast and rubbery Sevens had moved. 7 Shades of Sneaky Snap didn't hang on like a dog with a stick, but let go quickly, hitting the floor and scrambling back. She squeaked and rasped and knocked over a chair with a great clatter on the flagstones, which made Evelyn wince and Tenny go PBT. Seven slid behind me and clung to my back like a cowering dog, then ruined the effect by peering over my shoulder at Zheng and sticking her tongue out. Zheng raised her injured hand and stared at the wound with mild interest. The bite had gone deep, sliced flesh to ribbons. Blood dripped down her hand and wrist and onto the floor. "Oh, great, thank you," Evelyn said. "Thank you for adding literal blood on the floor to the stench you already brought in. The leech bit me, wizard, not the other way around." "Oh, come off it, big girl," Rain said. "That was your fault. You gonna be keeping that wound?" She nodded at Zheng's hand, but it was already rapidly healing, the blood slowing to a trickle. Not quite as fast as Twill, but fast enough to look entirely unnatural. I twisted my head to check Seven's face around my shoulder. Her little pink tongue was busy licking Zheng's blood off her lips. It smelled of iron and cinnamon. Do we have to deal with vampire implications here?" I asked. "Is Zheng in danger?" "Nah," Sevens rasped, staring at Zheng with a sullen expression. "Got you good. Why don't you keep it? Don't I count?" "You cheat, leech," Zheng purred. "Not anymore," Sevens replied. "Okay, new rule," I said very loud and very clear, putting my hands on my hips that dislodged Sevens briefly, so I could make my point. "Anybody who wants to spend the night in my bed is not allowed to bite each other, grab each other by the hair, or otherwise physically assault and harass each other. Do I make myself clear?" I tried to stare equally at both Zheng and Sevens. "She started it," Sevens rasped. "I did," said Zheng. "I mean if biting or hair-grabbing are both out," Rain pulled a very theatrical shrug. I blushed beetroot red and stared her down, but she just pointed a finger gun at me. "You're out too." Preem was staring at the fallen chair. Seven slid entirely behind me, but Preem did not goad her out with a silent look. She transferred her attention to Zheng instead. Zheng stared back. Preem did not relent. She knocked the chair over, Zheng rumbled. Preem continued to stare. HNGH, Zheng sighed, then bent to pick the chair up. "No," Evelyn snapped. "No, stop touching things. You're practically carrying cholera." "Dirty," Preem intoned. Evelyn jabbed a finger at Zheng. "You need a bath." "No, scratch that, you need to go in an autoclave." "Filthy," said Preem. "You don't order me, wizard." "No, but I do," I said with a sigh. "You are filthy right now, Zheng, that much is true." "Disgusting," Preem carried on. Zheng shot her a sour look. "You need to be cleaned," Evelyn said. "Scrubbed. Sanitized. And then you and I are going to talk about your zombie friend out there in the city and figure out what to do." "Vile," Preem added. Wizard." Zheng rumbled. "This is my duel. I am home for the sake of the shaman's heart, not for you, not for." "Long black hair," Preem intoned. "Ponytail. Green eyes. 6'5". Mid to late 20s. Jogging bottoms, red with white stripe. Gray hoodie. Favors left leg." We'd all heard the details before, of course, but it was such a non sequitur that we all paused to look at her, all except Zheng, who stared with eyes gone wide and mouth open in shock. I'd never seen her so shaken. Preem stared back, milk-white and unreadable, hands folded neatly in front of her long skirt. "How do you know that?" Zheng hissed eventually. "Instrument case on her back," Preem carried on. "Hard shell. Guitar. Likely does not contain guitar." Zheng's lips peeled back from her teeth in wordless rage. Ah, Evelyn said as realization dawned. Preem knows your friend too, right? Rain asked. The other, Preem continued. Black hair. Short bob. Green eyes. 4'10". Teenager, perhaps 15 or. What other? Zheng roared. You did not see the other, Preem intoned. I did. Preem's mysterious stalkers the other day, Evelyn said with a tone of resigned finality. She sighed and leaned back in her chair, exhausted by the confluence of our troubles. Shit. An unbound demon and what? Her mage handler. Her charge. Her younger bloody sister. There was, Zheng sputtered. There was only one. I saw only one. And. She was free. She was. Evelyn shook her head. We don't know what you saw. Vultures will be here soon, I murmured. A chill went up my back, raising the little hairs on my neck, and my bioreactor could do nothing to combat this cold. Everyone looked at me, all pinched frowns and polite curiosity in concerned eyes. I cleared my throat, feeling as if I'd been possessed for a moment. Edward Lilburn said that to us. Remember? He said it with a false mouth over his own, but that was him speaking those words. Maybe he was right. Rain nodded. Back at the meeting in the pub garden. She puffed out a long sigh. There's no power vacuum, Evelyn said, but her voice did not carry true conviction, ruined by a hard swallow. There isn't. I'm here. I think the vultures are here regardless, Evie, I said. Sherrowford's cracks are filling up with monsters. The argument only got worse after Zheng emerged from the bath. With nothing but silent stares, Preem made it crystal clear that Zheng was not stepping 1 foot further into the house while smelling like she'd been rolling in pig urine. Zheng began to angrily strip her clothes off and dump them in a heap on the floor. We all scurried out of the kitchen and upstairs, or in Evelyn's case, into her magical workshop, along with Tenny, much to her and everyone else's confusion, but Tenny seemed to like it. Preem stayed to supervise the biohazard safety protocols. I would have stayed to watch too. With Zheng in any other state, I would have quite enjoyed the sight of her ripping off her clothes in frustration, but even I have limits. She smelled so bad it made me gag. While a very large and very naked Zheng stomped upstairs to sit and fume in the bathtub, Preem stuffed the fouled clothes into the washing machine and placed Zheng's boots in a bowl of warm soapy water for special attention. She did something esoteric with the washing machine, too. Not only did it display 3 red lights like she was about to overload an engine, but when the wash cycle finished the panel lit up with a flashing orange warning LED. Preem, I called when I noticed the flashing. Is this safe? She can take it, Captain, Rain said, laughing. Please leave the room, Preem told us as she bustled in. We did, and Preem closed the door to the utility room. 8 full minutes passed before she emerged again, but the dryer was thumping around with Zheng's wet clothes inside and nothing was amiss, no scorch marks on the ceiling or burns on Preem's hands or puddle of acid eating through the floor tiles. Preem, what? I asked, boggling at her. Preem just stared back. I suspect we're better off not knowing, Evelyn grumbled from the doorway to the magical workshop. Just don't break the washing machine, please. That's an extra headache we don't need. You live in merciful ignorance, Preem intoned. Then she turned with a spin of her maid dress and marched off to continue dumping hot water over Zheng's head. In the interest of hygiene and health, I gave Seven's hair and scalp a wash as well, where Zheng had touched her. She complained like a cat forced under the cold tap, gurgling and rasping and whining the whole time, though all I did was have her bend over the tiny tub in the downstairs bathroom so I could direct the cheap rubber hose shower head replacement at her skull. And I used nice hot water too. Mouthwash, I said afterwards, handing her the bottle. Nerg. She pouted at me from beneath the towel over her wet hair. You bit her, Sevens. She was filthy. You have no idea what was on her skin, and frankly I don't want to find out. That mouth isn't coming anywhere near me until it's cleaned out. Now swish with the mouthwash or I'll brush your teeth for you. NNNNNNN, should be cheating this, Sevens whined. But she used the mouthwash, though she did pull a face after spitting it out. By the time Zheng climbed out of the bath and stalked downstairs like a panther who'd been caught in a thunderstorm, we had all reconvened in the magical workshop except Lazi and Tenny, because Lazi didn't like to think about these things too much, and Tenny sensed her mild distress so went to play video games with her. Zheng had borrowed a pair of Rain's jogging bottoms, almost too small for her hips and backside, and made do with a pair of towels draped over her shoulders, which made it a little difficult to take her seriously despite the topic of conversation. With a sulk on her face, Preem drying her hair, and her skin smelling of soap and spice, she reminded me of a large dog after a forced bath. "This is mine, wizard," she was rumbling at Evelyn over the map of Sherrowford spread out on the workshop table. Evelyn had cleared away notes and books and magical detritus to make room for the full-size Ordnance Survey map. It was the same one she'd once used to mark the locations of the Sherrowford cult's miniature pocket dimensions, spatial loops, and dead-end traps. Streets and buildings were outlined in looping red, whole swathes of the city were dominated by Evelyn's neat handwritten notes, and area after area was marked off with big black X symbols, loops closed by Preem, many months ago now. She'd not known what to do with my squid skull mask, so I was cradling it in my arms and resisting the urge to put it on. Evelyn banged the map with the head of her walking stick, trying to lose her temper, but even her lips twitched at the sight of Zheng sitting in a chair with Preem drying her hair. "Wizard," Zheng rumbled a warning. "This is deadly serious," Evelyn said with a cough. "If this was just one random zombie out there in the wilderness, well, I still wouldn't like it. But I cannot police everything that goes on in Sherrowford, that's obviously beyond me. Beyond us. And what's the point, anyway?" She let out a strangely sad sigh. "What happened to your city?" Rain asked with a smirk. "Shut up before I shove my walking stick down your throat," Evelyn said, but for once her tone of voice didn't match her words, though I tooted and rolled my eyes all the same. "If this was just a zombie, fine, Zheng can throw herself at it all she likes." "No she can't," I corrected gently but firmly. Zheng glanced over her shoulder at the tone in my voice, eyes sharp as knives around the edge of the towel as Preem dried her hair. Her look went right through me. I held her gaze but almost faltered, wrapped in my tentacles as a bulwark against scrutiny. Did she pick up on the possessive taint in my words, or had I successfully concealed the truth behind my concern for her safety? "What if you don't win?" I forced myself to say. Zheng shrugged. "That is part of hunting." Preem finally finished drying Zheng's hair and stepped back, revealing Zheng's dark mop sticking up in all different directions. I sighed with affection and jealousy and a deep pang I didn't understand and didn't want to acknowledge. Why did I feel this way? I didn't want her to go out and meet this demon host again, not unless it was with me at her side. Was I worried for her safety, or that she might leave me? The only person capable of unraveling that question for me was currently sitting with her legs curled up beneath her on a chair, wrapped in my yellow robes like a blanket, staring at the map on the table and moving her head side to side like a cat trying to figure out an optical illusion. If Sevens had any supernatural insight into my internal struggle, she wasn't letting on. No more cheating applied to me too, I guess. Did it apply to Zheng? I almost laughed at the terrible double meaning. But externally I extended a peace offering. As Preem stepped back and folded the towel over her arm, I went to Zheng. I followed pure instinct and sort of hugged her from behind, awkward with the skull mask in one hand. I wrapped my arms around her shoulders with my head against the furnace heat of her neck, nuzzling her and sighing with the shared contentment of skinship. One of her hands came up and spread fingertips through my hair. Only when I was fully committed did I realize I was quite literally draping myself over her, like a bad war movie temptress. I went a bit red in the face, gave her an extra squeeze, and straightened up, clearing my throat. Only Rain caught my embarrassment, eyebrows raised in private jest. Zheng watched me rise, eyes vaguely sullen as she let me go. I don't want you to get hurt, I told her. You know that. We've been over this, Zheng. You matter to me. NN, she rumbled. Shaman, you cannot stop me hunting. Can't you stick to squirrels? I'll even eat one, if you cook it. She snorted. Neither denial nor acknowledgement. She turned from me, and I knew that was the last word on the subject. As I keep trying to say, Evelyn repeated herself with a note of irritation, if this was one stray zombie from God alone knows where, that would be one thing. But the companion who shares a family resemblance with her, that implies something else, but I don't understand what. Her voice tightened. Besides, they followed Preem. There was no other, Zheng rumbled. Says you, Preem intoned. We don't have time for this, Evie, I protested. You said it yourself, you can hardly be expected to follow up everything that happens in the city. Perhaps they don't even concern us, perhaps they've already moved on now. Zheng gave them the slip. Perhaps they have nothing to do with Edward Lilburn at all. Heather's got a point, Rain added from her chair. She was leaning back with her feet against one of the table legs. She risked Preem's wrath if she put them on the table itself. We don't want to open more fronts. Fronts, Sevens rasped to herself, thinking as she stared at the map. Evelyn tapped the map as well. Just tell me all the places you met the zombie. I won't ask you to track her for me if. This is mine, wizard, Zheng rumbled, voice turning angry, dangerous enough to make Evelyn flinch and go pale. How many times? None, Preem intoned, stepping into Zheng's line of sight. Why is this our responsibility? I started to say. Whoa, down girl, Rain interrupted. This is my hunt, there was no other. Was too, Preem countered. RRRR, Seven started to growl at all the noise. I tried to raise my voice. I don't see why we should. Slam. Evelyn lifted her walking stick and slammed it down across the table with an almighty crack against the wooden surface. I jumped, Rain did a performative flinch, Zheng and Preem didn't react except to shut up, but Seven squawked like a parrot with a sore throat and fell out of her chair. I quickly went over to help her up. They followed. Preem, Evelyn said, loud and slow, as if we were all stupid and hard of hearing. Her eyes blazed, daring defiance as she looked at each of us. Even Zheng was not spared. But nobody spoke up, so Evelyn took a deep breath and let it out slowly. We are still waiting for Miss Webb to get back to us about the documents she stole on our behalf, Evelyn continued, more calm but not less angry. There is nothing else we can do in the meantime. We are waiting. And they followed Preem. We understand, Evie, I said, and she nodded at me, distracted. At the very least, I want these people found and ruled out as a threat, she carried on. And you? She jabbed her walking stick at Zheng. You can go out and get yourself killed if you want. I'd rather you don't, because bless her mad heart, Heather loves you. And I care about her well-being. If you get yourself killed and she has to grieve for you, so help me God, I will move heaven and earth to put you back in that body so I can hang you upside down and have Preem beat you. Evelyn paused, shaking slightly with emotional effort. Zheng opened her mouth on a rumbled reply, but Evelyn tapped the table and pointed at the door to the kitchen. Out. Zheng twisted her head, raising her chin. A big cat denying that any had the ability to command it. Slowly, with all the airs and graces of a Neolithic monarch on her throne of stone, Zheng crossed her arms and lapsed into sullen silence. I breathed a private sigh of relief and felt such terrible guilt. I'd not had to step in to put my foot down. Evelyn's words had spared me having to inflict the horrible indignity on Zheng of forcing her to forego her passions. But that was just cheating. I still got what I wanted. Zheng, all mine. The victory did not taste sweet. So, Rain broached into the awkward silence, swinging her feet to the floor with a double tap of rubber on floorboards. How exactly are we proposing to find these two mystery ladies? Evelyn nodded, eyes going to Zheng again. Zheng rumbled, head wobbling from side to side. I could not track the demon without being tracked in return. She is too good. Couldn't or wouldn't? Evelyn asked. Couldn't, Zheng replied, just the wrong side of angry. I cleared my throat, hoping to forestall another blow-up. You said yourself, Evie, they followed Preem. They might do so again, or follow any of us, perhaps. Preem. No. Evelyn shook her head. I'm not using her as bait. Preem turned to stare at Evelyn. Nobody gets used as bait, Evelyn clarified. I sighed. That's all well and good, Evie, I agree, but... Sevens? Evelyn asked. Bluff? Sevens made a sound that involved sticking her tongue out halfway. I don't even know these people. Fine, Evelyn huffed, staring at the map again. We can't use anybody as bait, anyway. I don't like the idea of approaching this pair in the street, not if they're operating out in the open. They'll be protected in some fashion. We need a way to surprise them when they're vulnerable, but to do that we need a way of tracking that doesn't involve Zheng, apparently. How about? Knock knock. The knock on the front door was somehow both jaunty and full of energy. The whole room paused to stare into the kitchen, where the single window showed that night had fallen while we'd been speaking. Rain stood up and reached inside her jacket, drawing her handgun. Knock knock, knock knock knock. Zheng rose too, still draped in towels. I found my mouth had gone very dry. Preem began to move and stepped into the kitchen, going for the front door. I hope you're right about losing that tail, big girl, Rain shot back as she hurried on Preem's heels. Zheng rumbled with wordless irritation. In moments we were all in the front room, all except Evelyn who stayed in the kitchen doorway, going white in the face. Sevens peered around her. All around us the house itself seemed to hold its breath. Preem waited by the door, watching in silence as Rain hopped up the stairs to check who was waiting on the doorstep. Zheng sniffed at the door frame, frowning then breaking into an amused grin just as Rain came barreling back down. It's fine, it's fine. Rain called out, putting her gun away and going for the door. Don't open it. Evelyn hissed. What if? But Rain was already there, sliding back the bolts and unlocking the latch. She threw the door wide on the warm night air, letting in a streetlight glow, the scent of dry grass, and a very confused-looking werewolf. Went Twill. Her big grin froze at the sight of all of us standing there to greet her. She probably hadn't expected almost the entire household at once. Oh, I breathed a sigh of relief, my tentacles relaxing. Twill, it's you. Hello. Hey, Rain said, you came at a weird moment. Disappointing, Zheng rumbled and turned away. Be nice, Preem intoned. Twill said again, eyes searching past the rest of us for Evelyn. We said I was gonna come over. When the last exams were out. Which was today. So here I am. Evelyn let out a huge sigh, shaking slightly with adrenaline as she passed a hand over her face. Yes, yes. I forgot. Yes. Twill crept over the threshold, looking sheepish. Something going down. Speak of the devil and she shall appear, Evelyn muttered. Oh, I said. My eyebrows climbed as I met Evelyn's look. Devil? Twill frowned at us. Twill, Evelyn said with a formal clearing of her throat. It seems we have need of your nose. Twill's nose was fast, her feet were faster, and her mind was sharp as a knife however emotionally dense she could seem at times. She was back 36 hours later, at the crack of dawn. Lozzie squealed in surprise and delight as Twill literally swept her off her feet, spun her through the air, and placed her back down with a flourish, unsteady and blushing hard. Lozzie flapped about in her borrowed pajamas, chest heaving like she was on the cover of a bad romance novel. Tenny trilled a mildly offended, not squid, but Twill was too hyped up to pay attention to the correction. She was already turning back to the kitchen table, where Evelyn, Rain, and myself all sat blinking at her in the watery morning light. Psychos and wizards and maids and all the rest, she went on, then hesitated when she gestured at Sevens lurking behind my chair, eating a piece of overcooked bacon with her bare hands. And whatever the hell you are, shine on you, weird little goblin. Oh my God, Evelyn grumbled like a dying engine, a spoonful of cereal halfway to her mouth. Who let her in here at this ungodly hour of the morning? You did, Preem said in a sing-song voice. You did, Dumbo, you gave me a key. Ba-dum-bum-bum. Twill drummed on the kitchen table, shaking the breakfast things. Rain was beside herself with laughter. I could only stare. We hadn't seen Twill this animated in ages, certainly not when she turned up on our doorstep the evening before last, and found herself press-ganged into helping us hunt mysterious zombies. And guess what, buckaroos? You're running away to join the circus. Evelyn said, still groggy from waking up not 20 minutes ago. Twill, you're meant to be out looking for those. She spread her arms, took a bow, and slapped her backside right down into a waiting chair. Then she whipped off her blue and lime coat, tossed it onto another chair, and put her feet up on the table, trainers in the air. She showed us all her pearly white teeth in a smug grin. Twill was entirely human right then, no trace of the ghostly wolf form laid over her flesh, but there was more than a touch of wolfish pride on her face. Now where's my goddamn rotisserie chicken, she said. Feet, Preem intoned. Off table. Oop. Twill grimaced so hard it made me splutter with laughter and cover my mouth. She whipped her feet off the table, nodding apologies to Preem. Sorry. Sorry, got carried away. Carried away. Can you blame me though? Preem did not answer, too busy spraying that part of the table with Dettol and wiping it down, lest an invisible crumb of dirt had fallen from Twill's all-too-clean white trainers. Twill settled back instead, smoothing her white hoodie over her belly with animalistic satisfaction. You found them? Evelyn asked, squinting and frowning through bleary eyes. Morning was not kind to her. You gone deaf while I was busy? Twill shot back, grinning a shit-eating grin. Yeah, damn right I found them. Who's the best tracker in the whole world? Who? Oh, is it this lass? Is it me? She pointed her index fingers at her own face, pumping her hands up and down. Oh, Twill, well done. I said with a sigh of relief. I'd been uncomfortable with this entire endeavor, guilty about what we'd forced her into, worried it would go wrong, but her sheer exuberance was rubbing off on me. Twill was not my type, but it was difficult not to respond to a beautiful person being so full of energy. Without thinking what I was doing, I started to give her a little round of applause. Lozzie joined in. Tenny slapped her tentacles about. Twill, don't take this the wrong way, Rain said, trying to keep a straight face, but you didn't do a line of coke for breakfast this morning, right? She didn't see you, Langren. Zheng rumbled, unamused. She did not track you back here. Not a chance, Twill said, almost purring. They didn't see me even once, not even. Zheng hissed through her teeth, like wind through a wall of knives. Yeah, neither of them. Twill carried on, though I was wincing. Not even when I got literally like 8 feet away from the tall one. They're not actually any good at tracking or losing a tail. You've just lost your touch. Zheng growled, lips twisting. Evelyn cleared her throat. All that means is the unidentified demon host was able to track Zheng because of her nature. One demon host recognizing another, not a skilled hunter. Zheng's eyebrows drew together, uncertain if she should be relieved or offended. It just means you recognized each other, Zheng, I said out loud. Not that there was anything special happening. Nothing like that. Zheng stared at me for a second, then shrugged. I felt a twist of guilt in my chest, but there was no time to examine that now. "Hey, where's the dog?" Twill asked, peering about under the table. "Whistle sleeps late," Tenny informed her. "He sleepy." "Sleep. You really did find them?" Evelyn asked Twill, taking a delayed bite of cereal and then speaking around it. "You're not just having a laugh." "Course I really found them." Twill tooted at her. "What do you take me for, a con woman?" Evelyn waved her off, waking up as her curiosity warmed. "And, what did you find? Did you see what they're up to? Where they live?" "The little one and the big one," Twill said with a wink. "Where they live or where they're staying at least, and everything they got up to yesterday. Hell, I can even tell you when the younger one was taking a dump." "Ew," I said, wrinkling my nose. Sevens made a equally disgusted gurgle behind me. "Joking." Twill laughed. "Where did you find them, then?" Evelyn asked. Twill waggled a finger. "Ah. What about my chicken?" Evelyn huffed. "Later. Come on, details now. Where were they?" Twill gave her a look, then rolled her shoulders and nodded with resignation. Even I could tell she was trying to tone it down, to keep a huge grin off her face as she carried on speaking. "Oh, nowhere special," she said. "They're living with the local Sugandese community." Evelyn stopped chewing and gave Twill a look so hard that she may as well have been carved from granite. An unimpressed and vengeful goddess, laser-etched into the moon. Twill was trying very hard not to grin, on the verge of losing control. Rain bit her lips from the inside and put her face in one hand. "Sugandese," Preem echoed. Twill turned red in the face with effort, gripping the table. Lozzie exploded with squealing giggles, face in her arms. "Sugandese?" I echoed, confused by the word and doubly confused by everyone else's behavior. I thought my geographical knowledge was pretty good, but I was coming up short. "I don't recognize that." Twill turned to me and broke into the craziest grin I'd ever seen on her face, like a mad wolf about to open wide enough to swallow the world. She started to speak, but Evelyn got there first. "I will have you Garrett and your body burnt," Evelyn hissed. "Nuts," said Preem. "I am sorry, but what is going on?" I asked, losing my temper. Rain was quietly breaking down in laughter next to me. "Am I being left out of something important again? Are we regressing, here?" "Nuts!" Lozzie yelled. "I'm going to lose my shit here," Rain managed to say between her fingers. "Twill, hey," Rain said, clearing her throat. "You're here before the supermarkets are open. What is it right now, 6? We didn't expect you to be this fast." "Supermarkets? Oh no, hey, no way are you fobbing me off with that. I want the good stuff, one of those ones with the honey glaze from that place on Sister's Corner, that they like, take the legs off and grill them for you. I have out, over, and super performed on this, I want my payment." She slapped the table again, grinning in her maniac victory. "Give me the meat." Evelyn rolled her eyes. "That means somebody has to actually go and get the bloody chicken, before you'll even talk. It's 6 in the morning. You're not going to eat it now." "Bloody right, I'm gonna eat it now," Twill said, her tone offended but still laughing. She was deriving far more pleasure out of this act than she ever would out of the actual chicken. "I've had the exam season from hell, and then I perform a miracle for you. I want my chicken. Give me my chicken. You promised me a chicken." "Excuse me," I said out loud, then blushed slightly when everyone looked at me, but sat up in growing defiance. "I still don't understand. I feel intentionally left out of something here. Who are the Sugandese? Was that some kind of joke?" Lozzie emitted a high-pitched wheeze and almost fell over. Sevens let out a sound like "Berg" from behind me, burying her face in my shoulder. "Nuts," Preem repeated. I frowned at her. Rain leaned closer, a twisted smile on her lips. "Sook on D's titties." Rain. I squeaked, then I froze, mouth hanging open as the words sank in. I rolled my eyes so hard it hurt a little. Oh, I don't believe it. I don't believe you lot. Oh my goodness. Really? I told you it was immature, Evelyn grumbled, pushing her half-empty cereal bowl away. Do we really have to go get the chicken now, Twill? Are you serious? Twill leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. If I don't get my chicken, that's violation of contract. Dunno how you do it down in Sussex with the rest of the southern fairies. Excuse me. I squeaked. Twill did a double take, suddenly chastised. Present company accepted. That's beside the point. Twill. I don't want to hear you say that again. I blushed from the effort of confrontation but gave her my best stare. Alright. Sorry, I don't know how it is down there in Sussex with the rest of the southern posh wankers. She shrugged, grimacing through her teeth. I'd ruined her flow but I didn't regret it one bit. But up here in the north we do things by miners' rules. One out, all out. Give me my chicken or I'm on strike. Evelyn sighed, closed her eyes, and pinched the bridge of her nose between thumb and forefinger. Fine. Sister's corner it is. Preem, be a dear and help me up, please. I need to get dressed if we're going to do this. Actually, I'll go, I said. Everyone glanced at me. I could do with the walk. And Rain can come with me. Right you are, boss, Rain said with a wink and a teasing salute. Aw, no, come on, Twill suddenly protested. It was Evie's promise, you don't have to do it for her, Big H. I would like to stretch my legs, I told Twill, matching action to words as I stood up from breakfast and took a deep breath. Sevens rose with me, clinging to my back. And to take a walk with Rain. Then I'll come with. Twill said, bouncing up from her chair. I glanced at Evelyn, just a quick flicker of my eyes, but she looked away. Neither acknowledgement nor denial. Maybe she wasn't even aware. She needed to either apologize to Twill, or work things out with her, or maybe say something I couldn't even imagine. She was the one who'd started this, the one who'd roped Twill into our plans, got her to help us yet again. I still wasn't entirely clear if they were a couple, despite the intimacy they'd shared, and I got the impression they didn't know either. But that hadn't stopped Evelyn from using her. I weighed the options, tell Twill to stay here and hope that in our brief absence Evelyn would find the courage to actually talk with her, or have Twill come with us to give Evelyn the emotional breathing space she needed. Neither was any good. And it hardly mattered, the damage was already done. The least I could do was show Twill that some of us did really appreciate her help. I smiled at Twill. That would be nice. We can go for a walk together. At least we had a result. I didn't blame Twill for her absurd performance and chicken-based ultimatum, though I also didn't doubt that she really wanted that chicken. She deserved payment for her professional services. We had quite nakedly used her, or Evelyn had, at least. I couldn't help but think about that on the short jaunt down to Sister's Corner and the specialty store Twill had been talking about, a pastry and meat pie shop called Creecor. Basically just an upmarket Greg's, Rain explained to me on the way there. The food, I mean, not the look. Place looks like shit. Yeah, but they make the shit, Twill said, turning to walk backward a few paces so she could grin directly at us. She bounced on the balls of her feet and flapped the corners of her coat with her hands in her pockets, full of energy in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. If she was sore about being exploited, she wasn't showing it directly. That wasn't like Twill, she wasn't any good at hiding her emotions. Maybe she enjoyed being of use to Evelyn. Whistle trotted along the pavement in front of us, the handle of his leash safely in Rain's right hand. Twill did a little hop-skip-turn and ruffled him behind the ears, replying to his surprised "rrrp" with a low, throaty growl of her own. He yipped a little, but not aggressively, and Twill laughed as she straightened up. Dog communication, hey. Rain asked. You gonna sniff his bum next? Twill, I piped up, feeling a little sheepish after all. I hadn't possessed the coherency to call off any of this in the first place. How have you got so much energy? You spent all day yesterday tracking those two women for us, aren't you tired? Yeah. Twill shot me a grin and a wink. But you know what? Oh dear, was this it? Was this a glimpse of the anger beneath her sunny disposition? What? I also happened to spend all yesterday tracking, she said, then pumped her arms and ran on the spot, finishing with a little yell like she was psyching herself up before a race. Ah! Feels good, it really does. I needed that shakeout after all those bloody exams. Evie knows me too well now, Shit, my parents would freak if they heard me say that. I wonder if she really does. I cleared my throat gently. When Twill had turned up on our doorstep 2 days earlier, Evelyn had treated her as if there was no way she'd refuse our request. I had assumed she was exploiting the tattered remnants of their romantic relationship, but now I wasn't so sure. I'd messed them up so badly with my meddling in the past, I didn't want to push, at all, in case I did so again. I needed to talk to Evelyn about this, but very gently. The rest of the journey there and back was thankfully uneventful, no mystery ladies or giant zombies popping out from between garden walls to follow us, and the spirit life seemed docile and sluggish. I wondered if they moved in seasons too, as I watched a huge leech-like creature slop along the road, ridden by a gaggle of gangly insects. The late spring weather didn't extend this early into the morning, so the thin fog nipped at my exposed hands whenever I removed them from the front pocket of my hoodie. Rain gave me Whistle's leash a few times as we walked past the houses and across the quiet main road, almost devoid of traffic, plunging deeper into the student quarter. He's a good dog, he doesn't pull, she said. Plus he's only got them short little legs, Twill added. Little pawsies, ickle bitty leggies. Whistle sniffed at the drains, nosed among every patch of grass, and investigated every curious stain on the pavement. A couple of spirits flitted over to him once, huge glassy eyes and twig-like fingers marveling over him, and I paused to let them enjoy the aura of dog before they moved on, with Whistle himself none the wiser. His short legs forced us into a more sedate pace than Twill would have said otherwise. It was only once we reached Sister's Corner that I realized that's probably why Rain suggested we bring him along. Creekor turned out to be just as awful-looking as Rain had implied, like a Greg's where nothing had been replaced for 20 years, all peeling paint and chipped countertops, stainless steel chairs and sticky floors. But the smell was so good that poor little Whistle's eyes dilated like he'd gotten into Evelyn's painkiller stash. My stomach started rumbling, and I'd not long ago had breakfast. From the quality of the food, I concluded that the owner of the place, a short, balding, Turkish man who wore grease-stained kitchen overalls, but had an expression like he was running a 5-star Hollywood restaurant rather than a weird rip-off Greg's in Sherrowford, spent all the revenue on a mixture of ingredients, equipment, and skilled labor, customer-facing aesthetics be damned. Or maybe it had something to do with the spirit clinging upside down to the ceiling, a mass of globes and tiny cogwheels and hourglasses, each part of it spinning and turning and twisting like a clockwork engine. To my horror, while we were waiting for our order, Rain expressed the question to the owner's face. I stood there, mortified for a second, afraid we were about to get thrown out. But he grinned at us, knowingly. "Ah, you want to know my secret?" he asked, winking at Rain over the counter. "You gotta be putting something in the food," Twill said, "'cause I'm addicted to this place and I don't even live in the city." "Never," he tooted. "All these other places, the ones that fail, they put crap out because they put crap in. They hire teenagers to put things in microwaves because they don't want to pay more than minimum wage. Me? TCH TCH TCH. He shook his head and winked, and left it at that. We ended up buying more than just Twill's promised chicken. An interrupted breakfast had left us more hungry than we'd expected, and any good strategy meeting was going to require a bit of gastronomic fortification. We picked up some fancy breakfast bake rolls stuffed with bacon and scrambled egg, along with a leg of lamb for Zheng and even a bag of dog treats for Whistle. Couldn't leave him out, not with the way his nose was twitching. Once we were back in the open air, me carrying the bag full of food and Twill with the plastic chicken container in both arms, she asked the obvious question. "So what's the plan now then?" she said. "We gotta go knock over those two you had me find, or what?" I cleared my throat before Rain could answer. "The plan is second breakfast, I think." Second breakfast was more peaceful than the first, but I found it hard to enjoy the food. Neither Evelyn nor Twill was a big believer in separating business from pleasure. Twill dug into her chicken, accompanied by some coleslaw scavenged from our fridge and a big dollop of mustard. Zheng appreciated the roast lamb with a deep purr that made me squirm. Sevens ate her food with little nibbles, perched up on the kitchen counter. Lozzie and Tenny reappeared too, lured downstairs by the scent of warm pastry and cooked meat. Twill made a point of sharing some of the chicken with both of them, giving Tenny a particularly juicy bit of wing meat on a plate, but when it came to Lozzie's turn, Twill fed her a bite from her own fork, grinning as Lozzie went and clapped her hands together, rewarded with a brief, fluttery hug from our pastel rainbow pixie. I raised an eyebrow at that, but nobody else seemed to pick up on how close they were being. Had they always been that way, or was I just noticing now? Or maybe it was just me, maybe I was projecting my lingering jealousy onto people who didn't think that way. But it made no difference when Evelyn cleared her throat and started asking questions about mages and monsters. Lozzie cleared out and Tenny went with her. Twill didn't seem particularly disappointed, so maybe that was all in my head. "Yeah, it was the tall one I spotted first," Twill was saying after scarfing down an entire drumstick, licking the glaze off her fingers. "She was kind of hard to miss when I finally found her. Women that tall are pretty striking, you know." She nodded to Zheng, totally serious. "She was waiting for the other one just off Bruster's Road, outside some kind of little business, down one of them side streets with the cobblestones, you know." "What business?" Evelyn asked, her own pastry growing cold on a plate before her. She'd barely nibbled at it. Twill shook her head. "Didn't get a chance to check. The younger one came out of the place and they were off, I had to stick with them." "Bruster's, right?" Rain murmured, tapping at her phone screen. She licked her lips in concentration and showed Twill the phone. "This the place?" Twill peered at the little screen, which Rain had opened to a Google Maps Street View image of Bruster's Road, a small lane down near the city center, all anonymous red brick walls and stout doors set back from the street, some with little plaques or signposts. "Nah, the one next to it." Twill pointed at the screen. "The one with the black door, that's the one the girl came out of." "What is that place?" Rain zoomed in on image and we all frowned at the little white board next to the door. "Safe Hands Dentistry," Rain read out loud. "Huh. Maybe she was getting her teeth cleaned." Twill went PFT and sat back. I shrugged, a little lost. Evelyn only frowned deeper. "Dental hygiene is essential," said Preem. "Big words from somebody who eats nothing but strawberries," Twill said. She speared a piece of crispy, glazed chicken with her fork and waved it at Preem. "You sure you don't want a bite?" "I am vegan," Preem answered. Evelyn shot her a curious look, as if trying to figure out if she was being serious. "Well," I piped up in her defense, "technically she is, she's not joking. I think." "No shit," said Twill. "Damn, okay, sorry. I'll remember that." "Thank you," Preem intoned. Evelyn huffed and shook her head. "What did they do after that, Twill?" "You followed them all day?" "Yeah, bloody right I did," Twill said. "Soon as I got downwind, I could smell it clear as you like." "Biggie doesn't exactly smell like Zheng but." "Biggie?" I echoed with a delicate grimace. "Yeah, Biggie and Smalls." Twill shot me a wink. Sevens let out a raspy giggle from over on the counter. It was weird thinking of them as like, just Target A and Target B or whatever, so I gave names. Biggie, Jing rumbled, deeply unimpressed. She was standing by the door to the front room, as if too restless to sit down. Oh yeah, you gonna do better? Twill spread her arms. Jing just stared down at her. If we can please stay on the subject, Evelyn sighed. Please. A dentist's, Rain said, low and shrewd, thumbing through her phone, with no web page and no public phone number. She looked up at our stares and grinned. Just doing a little background research. Safe Hands Dentistry either isn't real, or it's been out of business so long there's no trace of it left online. Oh, shit, Twill said. Oh shit is right, Evelyn hissed. I want to know what's in that building. I shoulda gone in, Twill sighed. No, Evelyn snapped. No, you complete idiot, you should not have gone in. Nobody goes in anywhere blind. She jabbed the table with a fingertip. Twill put her hands up in performative surrender. Understand? Answer me, Twill. Say it with words, not avoidance. You can talk, Twill muttered. What was that? Evelyn hissed. Evie, I said gently, starting to panic. Maybe don't. Nothing, Twill grunted. All right, I promise. No wandering into dark corners. She puffed out a breath like a grumpy teenager, which is exactly what she was, I suppose. Not that I need to worry about that usually. Evelyn sat back, visibly struggling to get herself under control. She flexed her maimed hand, as if the fingers had gone stiff from clenching too hard. Then she glanced at me, her gaze lingering far too long, an unspoken plea on her lips. But just when I was about to break the awkward silent tension, she turned back to Twill and gestured with the head of her walking stick. Continue, she said. If you like. I suppose. Well, Twill started, pulling her good humor back together. Like I was saying, the tall one stinks. Not quite like Jing smells most of the time, but there's this tang, you know. In common. Like something that body odor can't hide. I could tell there was something not human in her. Big ol' zombie, Rain said. Jing just grunted, we knew this already. Yeah, and she moves like one too, Twill said, not without a hint of appreciation. I could tell she was jacked, under her clothes, either that or wiry, but muscles either way. Moved really graceful like. I wouldn't want to get in a fight with her. Kudos to you, Jing. She was glorious, Jing purred. Yeah, I'll take your word for it, Twill sighed. No thanks. Was she still carrying the instrument case? Evelyn asked. Yup. A guitar case. Never saw what was in it though, sorry. And the little one? I asked. Nah. Twill shook her head, pulling a squinty frown that had me suddenly worried. Not so little once I got a good look. Her face says 16, 17 maybe. Maybe my age even, but she's just real small. Smalls, right? Get it? And weedy too, like Heather is. Twill gestured at me without thinking, then caught herself and went wide-eyed. No offense, Big H. I puffed out a little laugh. None taken. I am weedy. The shaman is not weak, Jing rumbled. Jing, I love you, I said, but I have noodle arms and get winded if I run up the stairs. Jing stared at me with heavy-lidded eyes. You stood burning before Lao Ye. You've killed mages. You freed me. You survived. Different kind of strength, I muttered, then raised my voice in an effort to avoid the topic. But Twill, that's not quite what I meant. Yeah, I know, Twill said, grimacing. And well, that's the weird part. Weird part? Evelyn said, as one might say the words what do you mean, nuclear device. I followed him all day, right? And I could be wrong, I could have messed up, but the kid didn't smell of anything. Not a zombie, then, Evelyn said. So? Twill shook her head. Nah, Evie, you don't get it. She didn't smell of anything. No scent. Zheng rumbled. Yeah. Right, Twill said. Nothing. Nothing at all. That doesn't happen, not with people. Everyone has a smell, a personal scent. It's really obvious to me. Sometimes I can even tell who's been in a room. Even Preem's got a smell, and she's like, made of wood inside, right? Woody, Preem said. But that kid? Nothing. Blank. She chopped the air with one hand. She was deeply uncomfortable all of a sudden as she frowned at her plate of chicken and coleslaw. We all fell silent for a second as she bent down and reached over to pet Whistle, who was still face-deep in his bowl of dog treats. She ruffled him behind the ears as she spoke. I mean, maybe if she was really, really clean, and all her clothes were new, I dunno. She was in a school uniform though, blazer and tie and stuff. Looked smart but not like brand new. I didn't recognize if the school was around here or if it was just an act. I dunno. Shit. I shared a look with Evelyn, but she was lost in thought, frowning to herself, chewing on her tongue inside her mouth. Dressed like a school student, during school hours? Rain asked. They get stopped at all? Oh, yeah. Twill straightened back up and pointed at Rain, lighting up again, thankful for something she understood. I forgot about that. A bobby stopped them at one point. Police? Evelyn asked with a frown. Oh dear, I said. Yeah, bloody right, Twill laughed. I thought they were done for. I dropped back so he didn't see me too. It was all casual, but I figured he was asking some boilerplate check about why the young lady wasn't in school right then or some shit. But the tall one did the talking and he walked off again, totally happy with it. The zombie did the talking? Evelyn asked, then let out a sharp sigh. Great. Which one of them was in charge? Rain asked. Oh, the tall one, totally, Twill answered. The kid really didn't want to be there, that was obvious. She was humming with nerves, all jitters and stuff. Head down, dragging her feet a bit. The big zombie was in charge, 100%. I think the kid was there under duress, like. Wish I could have done something, but you know. Zombie out in broad daylight. Twill pulled a face. Nobody else could tell, I bet. Looks totally human. They stopped to talk, said Rain. To each other, I mean. A little bit, yeah, Twill said. I couldn't get close enough to hear anything, but sometimes Biggie would stop them and they'd talk a bit. She'd always lean down so Smalls could whisper right into her ear, mouth cupped with a hand and all. I dunno what that was about. Evelyn grumbled. I could tell she was none the wiser than the rest of us. What did they do all day? I think they were visiting people, Twill said, nodding. I never followed them into any buildings, obviously, so I can't be sure. I'm good but I'm not like tactical espionage action level stealthy. She did little air quotes around those words. I dunno, Rain said, cracking a grin. I think you'd look good in a sneaking suit. Evelyn lit up at that, eyes burning with purpose. Tell me you got the addresses of those houses. Nope, Twill said, grinning. Did one better. Marked the spot on my phone and took a picture of each house. Couldn't get the apartments they went into, didn't want to follow them into the stairwells, but I got the buildings. Good. Evelyn nodded. How many houses? Of the 9 places, only 3. Rest was apartments. Send me them, on your phone. Now, I need to see. Twill fiddled about with her phone while she kept talking, eyes darting up and down from the screen. You know what was weird though? They never took a bus anywhere. Like they were walking this long circuit of downtown on purpose, like they were looking for something. Took them all day but neither of them seemed to get tired. Are they staying in the city? Rain asked as Evelyn thumbed through Twill's pictures on her own phone, frowning hard. Yeah. Twill said. Or at least they did last night, far as I can tell. About 5:30, they headed back to the city center and went into this little block of flats along the back of Story Lane. Real run-down place, over a couple of shops or something in the front. I thought they were just doing another visit or something, so I parked myself up behind some bins and Heather. She broke off. Sorry. I blurted out, trying to wipe the silly smile off my face. It's just the thought of you hiding behind some bins like we're all in a spy film. It's very silly. I am sorry. It felt silly. I was there an hour. Got all cold. Ah, Evelyn said, clearing her throat. My apologies for that, too. Whatever. Twill waved it off, though I was so surprised my eyebrows shot up. Evelyn frowned at me. Anyway, Biggie emerged again about 7 o'clock, but on her own this time. I was gonna follow her, but I thought, hey, what if they know I'm watching and this is a setup? Twill did a big shrug in her chair. So she walked off and I stuck around. I didn't see Smalls come out, but Biggie came back about 20 minutes later carrying a bag of Chinese takeaway. And, I followed her up. You went in after her? Evelyn asked, voice suddenly sharp. I was very clear, you were not to risk yourself. Do I need to wrap your knuckles with a ruler, you idiot? It was one of those communal shared entrances. Twill put up both hands. I let her go up ahead of me and then just followed the smell. Seriously, I was never closer than a whole floor behind her. Evelyn gave her a piercing look. I cleared my throat softly. I'm glad you stayed safe, Twill, I said. Please don't take any risks on our account. A bolus of guilt lodged in my throat. Yes, please don't take any risks for us, except coming to Wonderland to help me face down the eye. Place was in a right state, Twill was explaining, a real tip, dried piss and used syringes in the entranceway, that sort of thing. But I followed the zombies' smell all the way to their front door number 15. Must be really small in there by how close together all the doors are, just a bedsit or something. She shrugged. And that was it. I watched the place from the street for another couple of hours, but they didn't come out. I guess that's where they're staying. Twill fell quiet with an awkward puff of breath from the corner of her mouth. Silence descended on the kitchen, except for the chewing noises of Sevens still slowly working her way through her pastry. We all shared cautious looks. We'd been doing this for long enough now that we knew what came next. Zheng turned away from the table and strode toward the utility room. I was up and out of my seat in a flash, running on pure instinct, tentacles arcing out to block her path. Zheng, no. I snapped, then clamped a hand to my mouth, mortified. She stopped and stared at me, unsmiling and heavy-lidded. Shaman. It was not a question. Hey, what? Twill said. Rain went tense, but stayed quiet. I thought we already went over this, Evelyn grumbled under her breath. Zheng tilted her head to stare at me all the harder. Slowly, shaking with effort, I withdrew my tentacles from her intended path. I opened her way. Blinking back tears that I didn't want to feel, I let her go. Go on then, I hissed, unwilling to look at her, being unfair because she didn't understand what this meant to me. I could not communicate the depth of my jealousy. If you must. But Zheng didn't go. She stared at me for another couple of seconds, then rolled her neck so hard that her vertebrae went pop pop pop. Instead of leaving, she leant against the wall and folded her muscled arms across her chest. I stared at her, uncertain what was happening. I will hear your monkey plans first, she purred. Zheng, I sighed. Shaman. That's all well and good, Evelyn said, but we don't have a plan. We don't have any good options here. Nothing. We don't. Rain asked, in a tone that said she already agreed. Evelyn shook her head. Option 1, we break into their flat while they're present, and force a confrontation. She snorted. Not good. The teenager is a wild card, she could be anything, and any competent mage or other thing will certainly have protection set up. So no smash and grab, Twill sighed, almost disappointed. Option 2 is we break in while they aren't there, Evelyn said. Also bad, same reasons. Yeah, what would be the point of that? Twill asked. Gather information, determine who they are, set up an ambush. Evelyn sighed again. Plus, by the sounds of it, this flat is very exposed. Does the building have thin walls? Yeah. I could overhear people having an argument right through M. So it's practically a public place. We can't do anything flashy. Neither can they. She waved the head of her walking stick at Zheng. Which means you breaking their door down and challenging your friend to an honorable duel would draw a lot of attention. Community attention, police attention. I don't know which would be worse. I assume your fights happened in secluded spots, yes. Zheng grunted. I rest my case, then. Option 3 is we confront them in public. Same problems again. Evelyn huffed, sharp and frustrated. If they know who we are, they may be waiting for an opportunity. Or hell, I don't know. She spat, losing her temper as her carefully enumerated options added up to precisely nothing. Time was I would have sent something to murder them, but I can't do that anymore. I must know who they are, I must know why they were following Preem. We can't just let this drop. We have to confront them. I could walk up to them in public, Twill offered with a shrug. Like, in the middle of a crowd so nothing would happen. Tell them who I am, ask what they're up to. Sounds like their flat is basically in public anyway, Rain mused, leaning back on her hands. Why don't we just knock on their door and say hello? I asked. Evelyn turned to me, looking like she wanted to roll her eyeballs out of their sockets. Heather, I have more respect for your intelligence than to assume you're being, she trailed off, frowning harder until it looked like she was having difficulties with her digestion. Public place, Rain repeated, nodding. We come in peace, take us to your leader. Ah shit. Twill pulled a face. Really? If we need to find out what their business is, I explained, and we don't want to risk violence, why don't we just ask? Evelyn put her face in one hand and started groaning. Behind me, Zheng began to chuckle, slow and low and soft, like a tiger rolling stones in her throat. Sevens gurgled in agreement, perhaps her sense of drama was tickled by the absurdity. We better go real heavily armed, Rain said, keeping a bright smile in her voice. Just in case. Speak softly, Preem intoned in her sing-song voice. I hate this so much, Evelyn said into her hands. You can't be serious. Twill asked, eyes wide. Evelyn sighed and straightened up, hollow-eyed and exhausted. Heather is right. It's the least bad of a series of bad options. Knock on the door, as if we're just regular people, introduce ourselves, and ask what they're doing. While pointing a cannon at their faces. I don't really like the cannon part, I said. Tough, Evelyn grunted. Gunboat diplomacy it is. Gunboat diplomacy was a little difficult to organize in broad daylight, especially for a bunch of monsters and mages and our assorted menagerie. We couldn't just walk up to their door carrying guns and swinging baseball bats, not that we had need of such things. Even if we did, Rain was the only one qualified to use them. And we only had one gun. So the plan, the setup, and the execution were all as simple as possible. Fewer moving parts means less things that can go wrong, Evelyn explained on the afternoon we put the plan into action, as we were getting dressed for the journey downtown, slipping weapons and wands into pockets and beneath coats, 2 days after Twill's debriefing. This was the 4th time in 2 days that Evelyn had repeated those words. Wishful thinking, perhaps, she added. We'll be fine, Rain reassured her. We're taking every precaution, right? Unless you don't trust your own work. I trust my own work fine. Evelyn snapped, shoving her arms into the coat Preem was holding out for her. Do you trust your reaction times? Because if you don't, say so now, Rain went on, totally serious in a way I'd rarely seen her. We'll call the whole thing off. No joke, serious. I'll call Twill back right now and tell her to stop. Evelyn glanced at me, standing there in my hoodie, stomach churning. Rain had hugged me hard, 2 minutes earlier, but I was cold again. Do you insist we do anything differently, Evie? I squeezed out through a tightening throat. I didn't want to do this either. She sucked on her teeth for a moment and part of me prayed she'd say the words I'd promised to heed. In the end, this was my suggestion. If this all went wrong, it would be my fault. But Evelyn shook her head. She let out a long sigh and closed her eyes, silently counting to 10 as Preem settled her coat on her shoulders. Just keep the seals on you. If you feel one start to peel off, then stop, alert the rest of us, and we'll fix it or retreat. And for pity's sake don't scratch at them. And do what I say, remember, walk as if you're in a minefield. I nodded, and that was that. We were committed. The seals were Evelyn's answer to the problem of walking into an unseen threat. Rain had flippantly called them magical body armor, but that had prompted a 20-minute rant from Evelyn, mostly about how if one could make magical body armor, all our lives would be considerably easier. I gathered they were more akin to ablative heat shielding. Which means they are single-use, understand? Evelyn had made sure we all knew. And probably only good for a second, maybe 2, depending on what hits you. And they won't stop anything physical, just unseen tampering. Anything happens, you run. The seals give you the moment to pick yourself up and go. Maybe. Keep in mind these are untested, I'm basically making this up as I go along. What about you? I'd asked. Preem can pick me up, she'd answered without embarrassment. Behind her, Preem had flexed one arm beneath her uniform. Evelyn had spent the entire previous day making the things, adapting them from other work she'd done in the past, a pair for each of us who were going herself, Rain, me, Twill, and Preem. Zheng was the only exception. You put no magic on my body, wizard, Zheng had rumbled. She gets an exemption, I'd said. Suit yourself, Evelyn answered. As we left the house and began the nerve-wracking walk to the bus downtown, I considered that Zheng was getting off lightly. She'd already gone ahead, to lurk in an alleyway near the block of flats on Story Lane. The rest of us had the seals affixed beneath our clothes, 2 sheets of thin grease paper, each covered in dozens of tiny magic circles and their attendant esoteric symbols, affixed to belly and back with skin-safe cosplay glue. Safe, but not comfortable. The paper crinkled against my stomach as I moved and the corners were starting to itch. We took the bus downtown and spent an awkward, tense hour in a cafe just off the main high street, waiting for the call from Twill, watching the spring sun creep toward the horizon. I barely remembered a thing about that hour, couldn't taste my cup of tea, didn't know half of what I said to Rain. My tentacles wrapped me in a ball of safety and my bioreactor was going like a furnace in my belly. The gunboat part of our setup comprised Rain, Preem, and Twill. Rain was armed, heavily, everything hidden beneath her jacket or in the waistband of her jeans. If in some cosmic accident we were stopped by the police, Rain was probably going to prison for a very long time. Preem had no need of weapons, but she wasn't wearing her maid outfit, dressed instead like the elegant young lady she was, in a long skirt and a comfortable sweater. Twill was Twill, and currently following our quarry. The diplomacy part was Evelyn and myself, though Evelyn had her bone wand inside her coat most uncomfortable, I assumed. I had a head full of hyperdimensional mathematics, 6 invisible tentacles on my flanks, and a small can of pepper spray in my pocket. What was Zheng in this increasingly tortured metaphor? A battleship, perhaps, waiting offshore. She was under strict instructions not to follow us in. Emergency only. I'd bought her a phone, at last, or rather, Evelyn had. Now Zheng kept sending me text messages to check in, every 15 minutes since she'd left the house. Shaman. Yes. I am still waiting. By the time the call came, I could barely feel my hands for the nervous tension. Rain answered her phone, listened to Twill for a second, then nodded to the rest of us. Time for a house call, she said. Story Lane was a dump. It was a back street behind a row of dingy-looking shop fronts, the glowering visages of pawnbrokers and small-time bookies and unidentifiable businesses which advertised themselves with entry buzzers and barred windows, the bottom feeders at the outer edge of the foot traffic ecosystem of Sherrowford city centre. The rear was even worse, half-choked with overflowing rubbish bins and stagnant puddles that never truly dried. A few cars were parked on the curb, other little streets led off to less blighted places, but the lane itself was the sort of unposition that served no purpose except to move people in and out of the stubby flats that climbed over the shop fronts with their blank brick walls, only rarely punctuated by dirty windows. Every surface was drenched in late afternoon shadows, the sun hidden behind the opposite row of filthy red bricks. It wasn't too bad during daylight. Not totally deserted, I saw a young mother pushing a buggy down the opposite pavement, and an old man shuffling along, fussing with his flat cap. But I wouldn't want to still be here when night fell. Fun spot, can see why you pitched up here, Rain said with a broad grin as we met Twill at the end of the road. She was waiting on the pavement corner for us. Shut up, stay focused, Evelyn hissed. Her shoulders were as tense as I felt. She glanced down the horrible little street. Which one is it? The door with the green front and the glass side windows, Twill said quickly and quietly, hands in her coat pockets as she nodded sideways. We go in, it's up on the 3rd floor, 4th door on the right. Neither of them have left, they're both home. Unless they climbed out a window. Do not tempt fate, Preem intoned. My hands were slick and I was having trouble catching my breath. My tentacles felt like a straitjacket of my own making. I had to remind myself that everyone was by my side. We were all together. And Zheng was less than 100 feet away. If the worst came to the worst, all I had to do was scream my head off. Right, Evelyn said. Stick to the plan. Preem, Twill, you take. Which window is it? Rain said softly. Something in her tone made everyone freeze. Twill followed her gaze, up at the building. Ah, that one, yeah. Shit. Evelyn grunted in frustration, one arm twitching with a desire to belt Rain with her walking stick. Rain, what are you? Because it looks like we've been rumbled, Rain said. I followed Rain's gaze too. From the other side of a small, dirty window up on the 3rd floor, a pale oval was pointed down at us, crowned by a messy helmet of black hair and staring with a pair of eyes like sapphires. Neat little hands gripped the windowsill, half hidden inside the sleeves of a black blazer, as if she was straining up on tiptoes to spy. She did not withdraw in shock or hide with the embarrassment of being seen, but stared back in total silence, the unreadable poker face of a master dissembler or a traumatized child. Yeah, Rain sighed. We've been rumbled all right. Across the dirty, dank, shadow-filled street, deep in one of Sherrowford's most worm-riddled holes, from behind a pane of filthy glass, I met a pair of eyes like polished sapphires. Blue as a fire-drenched sea. That was the singular detail which struck me, even 3 stories up, obscured by the window and the angle of the lowering sun. The mystery girl Smalls, in Twill's inventive vernacular, was a pale oval sunk into the black background of her own hair and the indistinct room beyond. The late afternoon spring sun brushed her face like a timid wildflower in a peat bog. But those eyes were oceanic, deeper than their surface, and watching us in return. But she was no doll. Despite her frozen expression, I felt her attention crawling over me. An impression akin to déjà vu passed through me in a cold shudder. I did not recognize this girl and I had never stood on this spot before, but I knew this sensation all too well, the recognition that sparked between 2 thinking beings across an inhospitable gulf. I had forgotten, between my trial in Carcosa and the warm, welcoming, familiar cocoon of home, just how strange and alienating our own reality could be. Dark infinities lurked in so many corners of the earth. This girl was peering out from inside one of them. Then Rain lifted her hand and waved to the girl in the window. Smalls blinked those impossible eyes, slipped down from the window, and vanished beyond our sight. "Shit," said Twill. The spell broke and I could breathe again. I felt like I'd been locked inside those eyes. Reality reasserted itself in the sound of traffic passing nearby, the noise of distant voices, the hum and drum of Sherrowford on an ordinary afternoon. "Would a been nice if she'd waved back," Rain said with a little sigh, as if we were discussing a flirting prospect rather than somebody we were about to threaten with our metaphorical naval guns. Without thinking, I grabbed her free hand and held it tight. "Evie, it's okay," I whispered. "I think we're okay. We're okay. We're okay." My own calm surprised me. The implications of our position were beginning to filter into my mind at last, tightening my throat and dumping a pint of adrenaline into my bloodstream, but my reaction had been delayed by that strange moment of bridging contact with the eyes of the girl in the window, a moment shared between me and the dark corners of the earth. My tentacles, all six, ready and eager to flex and stretch, were uncoiling from my sides and creeping around Evelyn to form a protective barrier. She couldn't see them, of course, and I couldn't risk using them in public. Some poor passerby might have nightmares about poltergeists. "Yeah, hey, keep your voice down," Twill said, craning her head to glance up and down the street as well. "Somebody's gonna look at us freaking out. Just keep it cool, keep it real cool, yeah." Evelyn glared at our joined hands, then over at me, her lips pressed into a tight, bloodless line. Her palm was sweating against mine. I squeezed. She swallowed but didn't squeeze back. "We're okay," I repeated, feeling a lump growing in my own throat. The adrenaline was hitting now, we'd been seen. "Nah, this is fine," Rain said, confident and serious, nodding to herself as she stared up at the window and put her hands on her hips. "Perfect, actually. Perfect." Evelyn hissed. "Yeah, perfect. We're not trying to ambush them to rough them up or anything, we're just gonna say hello. This way they know we're coming, less likely to surprise them. They could be setting up to get the drop on us," Evelyn snapped at her. "Right now? In public? Nah." Rain shot her a wink. "Sure, yeah, they've got a moment to set up facing the door with a shotgun, metaphorically speaking. So us standing here and waving back is like shouting, 'Don't shoot, we come in peace.' If we just blunder there and surprise them, that actually makes it more likely they'll pull the trigger. Again, metaphorically speaking." Rain nodded to herself, talking as casually as about the weather. My head throbbed with nervous anxiety, but I held on to my jitters for Evelyn's sake. "I guess so," Twill mused, chewing on her tongue, one hand scratching absent-mindedly at her stomach. She wasn't immune to the itchy glue on seals either. "We're all still standing here and the street hasn't exploded, so yeah. I'm still in. And hey, if we back out now, I'm still gonna have to tell my family." "I can't countenance this," Evelyn said through a strangled throat. "They know we're coming," Rain said to Evelyn and myself with an easy smile and a twinkle in her eyes. "And we know that they know, and they know that we know that they know. So we all know that everyone else knows. You know." Evelyn gave her such a look. I did too, though I knew she was trying to help by transmuting Evelyn's fear into irritation. "Shut up," Preem told her. Rain shot Preem a wink and a hip-fired finger gun. "I think," I started, then wet my lips and pulled my threadbare courage together with a squeeze of Evelyn's hand. I swallowed a hiccup. I don't think that girl was normal. But if we retreat now, they might assume we were trying to ambush them. It would be very suspicious behavior. Rain nodded, trying to look sagely and wise. She squeezed my shoulder. Twill puffed out a breath and said, "In for a penny, in for a pound." Evelyn couldn't get a hold of herself. She'd gone from unable to squeeze my hand in return to holding on so tight it hurt my fingers. Her eyes, wide and a little bloodshot, darted between the window where Smalls had watched, the plain door that served as the entrance to the low-rise block of flats, and the end of the street, the promise of retreat and safety. "Evie," I said, trying to get her attention. "Evie, look at me, please. Evie. If you insist, then we'll leave. No arguments. Do you insist?" Twill squinted at me. "Big H, come on, you were right first time. It's mad to leave now. They'll think we were trying to, you know." She lowered her voice to a stage whisper, like we were mafia foot soldiers, her classically pretty face twisted with a grimace. "Whack them." "Maybe we should," Evelyn said, voice tight with effort. "Leave?" I asked. My heart began to soar with relief. I knew it wasn't the right choice, but I wanted to run too. Evelyn had fought hard against her own paranoia to reach this spot, this moment, this dirty pavement corner on a filthy, run-down Sherrowford Street, but what if she was right? What if her paranoia was right? Abyssal instinct crawled up my spine like a mass of sucking salty seaweed, screaming at me to run and hide from unknown potential predators. But instinct also demanded that I protect the pack, protect family. Keep those tentacles around Evelyn. And a tiny but insistent voice whispered, "What if that girl needs help?" "No," Evelyn hissed. "Whack them." "Yeah," Rain said, clearing her throat. "We're not set up for that. Unless you want to shout for Zheng." "I'm not being serious, you pair of morons," Evelyn said. "I'm venting." "No, we are not going to do that." "Phew," Preem said out loud. Evelyn shot her a filthy look, but then relented and drew herself up to her full height, struggling with her crooked spine. She met my eyes and finally managed to loosen her grip on my hand, but she didn't let go. Heather is correct. Retreating now would give the impression we wanted to ambush them. We're committed. We go in. We stick to the plan. She spoke to me alone, it felt, her soft blue eyes so familiar, a contrast to the pair I'd seen up in the window. I swallowed, nodded, and kept my tentacles around her like a shark cage as we headed for the front door. Preem and Twill took the lead, as the most physically robust of our landing party, followed by Rain just behind them. Evelyn and myself stayed in the rear, tanks up front, healers in back, as Rain had put it earlier. We had no need to discuss the plan from this point, we'd gone over it again and again, including the need to keep Evelyn at the rear. I'd never seen her stumble or fall because of her disability, but we all knew she couldn't run on her prosthetic and her withered leg, not really. The entrance to the block of flats was a pair of steel double doors, inset with and flanked by smoked glass which was filled with anti-shatter wire mesh. Weeds grew in the gaps between the paving slabs, fertilized by discarded cigarette ends and fossilized chewing gum. A rather optimistic tarnished brass plaque next to the door informed the doomed reader that the building was called Summerway Apartments. As we made our final approach, I kept glancing up at that third-story window to see if Smalls would reappear. "Heather, Preem," Evelyn said quietly but softly, just before we reached the door. "Any numismatics?" A shape like a cross between a gorilla and a giant rat was snuffling along the edge of the building's rooftop, as if searching for scraps, followed by some kind of living moss that oozed halfway down the building. In the street, keeping their distance from us, was a gaggle of creatures that could have passed for geese, if it wasn't for all the tendrils and snapping teeth. A 12-foot-tall humanoid figure stood stock still in one of the alleyway mouths, wrapped in white like a corpse in a shroud, a trio of eyeballs in its stomach rolling as if in a seizure. Back the way we'd came, a pair of ghoulish deer things were creeping along the road, locked in some slow-motion game with each other. "Well, yes," I said, "plenty. But nothing out of the ordinary. Nothing that could be a servitor. I can't be sure, but none of them look out of place. I mean, for spirits. They all look out of place." I cleared my throat. "You know what I mean." Only good boys and girls, Preem intoned, sing-song, as she paused by the front door to the flats. Evelyn peered forward to ensure the door wasn't booby-trapped. Unlikely, she'd explained during our earlier planning, not with something so public, but we had to check. Working quickly, she drew the modified 3D vision glasses out and squinted through them at the door frame, scanning quickly up and down. We all held our breath, praying that nobody who lived there would choose that exact moment to depart the building. It wasn't as if we could be forced to explain what we were up to, but a group of university-age women all acting weird would stick in a person's memory. That's the last place we would want to stay, if the worst happened and we left any mess for the mundane authorities. I don't see anything wrong, Evelyn muttered, swallowing on a dry throat as she tucked the glasses away. Preem nodded, grabbed the steel handle, and swung the door wide. She went in first, followed by Twill. "Tanks up front," Rain said, winking at me. "Hang back, yeah. Look after Evie." "I don't need looking after," Evelyn said. "I will," I replied, hiccuped softly, and held on tight. We reached the door to number 15 without stepping on any landmines or snagging any tripwires. Evelyn was so tense, squeezing my hand harder than she realized, thumping her walking stick down on every step. We may as well have been creeping through no man's land, between rows of barbed wire. The inside of the Summerway apartments, a name I absolutely could not append to this building, was just as bad as Twill had claimed. It was old, perhaps 1950s or even earlier, the sort of construction thrown up in a hurry to capitalize on spare space, cramming lodgers and renters into every nook and cranny the city offered. I did love old buildings, but nobody should be forced to live in a place like that. The entranceway reeked of urine and the unmistakable musk of cannabis. The dark corners were indeed littered with used syringes and fresh stains, along with a few discarded condoms. Bare wooden floorboards creaked beneath our feet as we climbed the narrow stairwell, flanked by equally bare wooden walls that some poor soul had once tried to wallpaper, but now only yellowed scraps remained. The banister was wrought iron, probably weighed a ton, and was scarred and marked with ancient burns and scorches. Must have been scavenged from a house fire in a mansion. Naked bulbs on bare wires hung from the ceiling of each small landing, each of which led off in a corridor with a double row of numbered front doors. The middle of each flight of constricted stairs and the dead end of each corridor was clotted with shadows. A few spirits lurked about, but not many wished to brave the tight confines. It was very difficult to keep in mind this was an inhabited building, that normal people lived here, that this wasn't some outsider warren deep in the earth or a castle full of horrors. We were approaching a zombie who had gone toe-to-toe with Zheng, at the very least, and God alone knew what else. Walking into the lion's den, yet again. One would have thought we'd learnt our lesson. Despite the sounds we could hear through the building's walls, a child laughing somewhere, a man calling out a muffled question, the low drone of a television, the whistle of an old-style kettle, and despite the presence of Rain and Twill and Preem close to hand, I wanted to armor up. My body ached with the need to cover myself in plates and spines, to sprout toxic veins and sharpen my teeth. I wished I'd brought my squid skull mask, though I could hardly carry that around in public, let alone wear the thing on my head. My tentacles flexed and twitched as we climbed the stairs, occasionally reaching for the banister with an urge to pull myself straight up the middle of the shaft and shortcut all this risky walking. In the face of danger, abyssal instinct burned bright with helpful suggestions: run fast, be sharp, strike first. But Evelyn's hand held me back, though she knew it not. Keeping my tentacles around her in a protective cage was more important than rocketing up the stairs and punching a tentacle through the skull of our quarry, like coring an apple. Not that I could have done that anyway, I'd probably just have bounced off the banister and winded myself. Nobody said anything until we reached the third-floor landing. Twill nodded down into the shadows of the corridor. "Number 15, third on the right," she whispered. Her voice seemed to carry too far in these bare confines, the wood a listening echo chamber. "Stick to the plan," Evelyn hissed through her teeth, throat bobbing with a dry swallow. I nodded, my heart like a fluttering dove and my breath tight in my chest. We crept up to the door. I felt equal parts absurd and terrified, like we were play-acting a cartoon break-in, but there was no pretend about any of this. Rain's hand crept to her pistol beneath her jacket, Twill's arms were free and ready for transformation, Preem stayed straight-backed and prim as always. Barely able to breathe, I kept my tentacles close as Evelyn pulled out the glasses again and looked the door up and down. She was as pale and shaky as I felt, twitchy and full of adrenaline. "Preem," she said eventually, barely a whisper. Preem dipped her head in a simple nod. She couldn't see anything wrong either. Evelyn put the glasses away and glanced at me. "Just a door," I mouthed. Twill was sniffing, nose in the air, brows knotted. Evelyn was so impatient and nervous that she actually tapped Twill's leg with her walking stick. Twill frowned back, but then nodded. "They're here," she whispered, showing her teeth in an instinctive canine display. We all shared a glance. This was it. Moment of truth. Evelyn worked her scrimshawed thigh-bone wand out from beneath her coat, one hand wrapped around the designs on the surface. She nodded to Preem. Preem raised a hand and knocked on the door, 3 medium-soft raps with her neat, pale knuckles. The sound was like a broken drum in this tight warren of old wood. We all waited, holding our collective breath. Rain edged her pistol out of her jacket, glancing up and down the corridor to check that nobody else was emerging from the other flats. Time stretched out. My back was sweating. The sticky seal paper itched terribly on my skin. "Try again," Evelyn hissed. Preem knocked again, exactly the same. A second passed, 2 seconds, 3, and then a tiny mule of sound reached us through the door. For a moment my brain couldn't parse it as words, it was so timid and pitiful. It's unlocked," a small feminine voice called through the wood, quivering and hesitant. "A trap," Rain murmured, drawing her gun into the open. She held it pointed downward. Twill flexed her hands, aching to make claws. "I don't know," Evelyn whispered back. Nobody touched the door handle. "Preem, do not touch the handle." "Tentacles," I whispered to Evie, my heart hammering on the inside of my ribs. I hiccuped, but I wasn't backing down now. "Evie, I can touch the handle. I can shed layers, I can shed and regrow a whole limb if I have to. Let me do it." "I can grow hands back too," Twill muttered, a bit put out. Evelyn's eyes searched mine. "I can do it," I said. "Like a lizard losing a tail. I'll be completely safe. And if there's more, if there's magic, you know I can do my thing." "If Heather says she can do it, Rain whispered. Evelyn swallowed hard, then nodded once. She let go of my hand and motioned nobody else to touch me. "When Heather opens the door, stick to the plan. No sudden movements. If anything unexpected happens, follow my directions. If I say run, we run." We know, damn," Twill said, bouncing on the balls of her feet. With my heart in my throat and my hands clenched into tight little fists, I uncoiled one tentacle and reached for the antiquated brass door handle. My pneumosomatic flesh, pale and gently strobing in the gloom, thickened around the tip as I reached out, adding layers of callus-like skin and reinforcing itself with spurs of stiff cartilage. I felt my bioreactor spike with power, flooding my bloodstream with things that had no place in a proper human body, anticipating the worst: an electric shock, a magical trap, an ambush. My tentacle grabbed the door handle. Nothing happened. I blew out a shaking breath. "You've got it?" Twill hissed. "Yes, I'm touching it," I replied. "It's safe so far." There was no need for words as I eased the door handle down. The others watched the ghostly spectacle with bated breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Only Preem could actually see my tentacle doing the work, until Evelyn quickly fumbled the modified 3D glasses back onto her face. If a passerby had chanced on us in that moment, we'd have ended up on a paranormal website for certain: 5 college girls watching a poltergeist open a door. Nothing happened when the door handle reached the nadir of its arc, nothing leapt out to claw off our faces when I cracked the door away from the frame, nothing detonated or screamed or pointed a gun at us as I swung the door wide to slowly reveal the cramped room beyond. Everyone peered over my shoulders. Twill was visibly twitching to rush inside, but she managed to stick to the plan. I did my best to ignore what I saw: the bare wooden floor and dirty walls, the pair of sparse metal bunk beds either side of the room, the backpack and sports bag and the low table, the fast food detritus on a battered kitchen counter. Most of all, I tried for just a moment to ignore the girl sitting on the right-hand bed, her huge sapphire doll eyes peering at us from over the rampart of her own knees drawn up to her chest, clutching a pillow. I had to try very hard to ignore the way she was shaking and shivering. "Hey there," Rain said to her, easy and light, radiating all that beaming confidence which she so often used on me. "That was part of the plan too. We'll step inside in a sec, but we've just gotta check it's safe first, yeah? And if it's safe for us, it's safe for you too. Promise." The girl on the bed just stared, eyes flicking between us. Next to me, Preem put a finger to her own lips, gesturing for quiet. While all this was happening, I reached just over the threshold with a pair of tentacles. Nothing happened, so I ran then along the inside of the door frame, feeling for ridges or bumps, sigils carved into the wood, or even something as crude as a piece of misplaced tape. I felt nothing out of place, no trap, no mechanism. "Doorway's normal," I said, surprised to find my voice squeaky with adrenaline. Evelyn barked. We piled through the doorway, in order, exactly as planned, well, almost exactly. Evelyn's jitters were so bad she almost tripped over the threshold, whacking her walking stick against her own leg and swearing with surprisingly colorful creativity. I had to catch her with my hands and my tentacles, making her jump in alarm and draw breath to yelp, but she understood what was happening and managed to swallow the scream. She nodded her thanks as I helped her into the room. My own legs were shaky, knees weak, but the plan went off without a hitch. Preem and Twill were into the room first, with strict instructions to check the corners, ceiling included, and be ready to intercept and shove back the big zombie lady, in case she was waiting to jump us. The object was not to provoke a fight, but to buy a second or two to make ourselves clear. Keep the gunboat's guns pointed without firing them, so to speak. Rain was through next, raising her pistol to exert some visible control of the situation. Then, when nobody exploded into a fountain of blood, Evelyn and I joined in the rear. "Shut the door," Evelyn hissed once we were inside. I obliged, pushing with one tentacle until I heard a click. No traps, no tricks, no treachery. We had only one problem: the zombie wasn't there. The bedsit room was one of the most horrible living spaces I'd ever seen with my own eyes. A floor of bare wooden boards showed a plethora of mysterious stains, matched in decrepitude by walls of crumbling plaster, scarred with the telltale flaking of internal water damage. The only furniture was a pair of metal bunk bed frames which looked like they belonged in a military barracks, a low table toward the rear of the room, and a single rickety, worm-eaten chair. A compact kitchen comprised the whole of one rear corner of the already cramped space, with a single chipped and battered countertop, once white but long turned brownish with age. The tiny oven probably didn't work and the microwave looked like it was about 40 years old. Empty plastic bags and polystyrene fast food containers littered the countertop. The room's single window, filthy from years of grime, let in little light. The one bare bulb in the ceiling didn't help much either. A trio of bags lay on the floor between the bed frames: a compact and somewhat cutesy tote bag in dark pink, a modern rucksack suited for hiking, and a heavy-duty sports bag. The sports bag was open on a mess of rumpled clothes, assorted toiletries, a few charging cables, and a couple of paperback books. A school uniform black blazer, white shirt, gray tie, with matching skirt and tights hung on a clothes hanger hooked over the end of one of the bed frames. Only one of the beds boasted an actual mattress on the bare metal crossbars, roughly made up with some very clean and soft-looking lilac sheets, totally out of place in this dank hole. The girl Smalls, as Twill had called her, was sitting on that bed, frozen and terrified as we all glanced about the room like a pack of wolves. A black hardshell guitar case lay on the bare metal frame of the opposite bottom bunk. "Where's the other one?" Evelyn said. The only other egress was the window, but it didn't look like it had been opened in decades. A tiny bathroom jutted off in the right-hand corner, containing a very old toilet and an unhygienic-looking shower. Rain took all of half a second to stick her gun and head in there. "It's clear," she said. "She's not in here." We all held our collective breath, eyes searching the room, as if Zhang's special friend was about to leap out of thin air. But there was simply nowhere in the room to hide, not even a cupboard. Rather absurdly, Rain ducked down to glance under the bed frames. No zombies there either. Preem was the only one of us not on the verge of panic. She was staring at the girl huddled on the bed. "Twill," Evelyn said, voice tight, "you said neither of them had left. They were both meant to be here." "I didn't see anyone leave," Twill protested, turning on the spot with her nose in the air, sniffing deeply. "I can still smell her." "Could still be in the building," Rain said, soft and controlled. "On another floor. To avoid us. Could have moved as soon as we were spotted." Her eyes flickered to the girl on the bed, the scrunched-up scrap of humanity staring back at us. With a sickening cold in the base of my stomach, I realized Rain was covering the girl with her handgun, not pointing the barrel directly at her, but close enough to make her intent obvious. Evelyn had revealed the full length of her bone wand, tucked it into the crook of her elbow, and was watching the girl as well, hand poised over the scrimshaw designs. Preem was just staring. I had to remind myself with an effort of will that we didn't know what we were looking at. "Twill," Evelyn said, hard and tight, then snapped when she didn't get a response. "Twill. Twill." "What?" Twill rounded on her, shrugging with hands that were already halfway to claws. "Oh. Right. Sure." Twill cleared her throat and shot a wary look at the empty air either side of herself. "Sorry. We don't even know if she's there," Rain said. "Evie, we need a decision." "Heather?" Evelyn looked at me. "Preem." There's nothing in here but us," I said. "Nothing pneumosomatic." "Hello," Preem said, sing-song soft, speaking to the girl huddled on the bed. "My name is Preem. What is yours?" The girl stared back at Preem's milk-white look, her own eyes like sapphires in moonlight. From the window I'd thought her expressionless, but up close nothing could be further from the truth. She was terrified of us, eyes wide and mouth a frozen line, heart-shaped face peering over the top of the pillow she had clutched to her chest. Her expression was that unique look of one who knows they must try very hard not to show fear in the face of dangerous predators. She was also absolutely tiny and incredibly pretty, almost doll-like. Twill had been right about her estimated age. By her face she was clearly at least as old as Twill, but petite in the extreme, perhaps even a whole inch or two shorter than me, though her frame was legitimately compact, not scrawny like mine. She had small, neat facial features, with a pale little nose and thick, dark eyelashes, all set in perfect porcelain skin. A messy helmet of black hair, thick and luxurious, full of random cowlicks and bouncy twists, fell level with her chin. She was dressed in a black knitted jumper over a white blouse, with matching black leggings and a pair of thick socks on her feet. Pale skin, black hair and those impossible eyes. Something wasn't right here. I recalled Mr. Joe King and his perfect disguises, selves layered inside each other like skins to be ripped off. The girl took a moment to gather herself before she could answer Preem's question, swallowing with some difficulty, chest rising and falling with breaths that came too fast. "Jan," she said. Her voice was weak and uncertain. "Short for Janice?" Rain asked her with a warm smile, despite the lingering threat of the gun. The girl shook her head, which made her hair bounce. "Hey," Rain followed up. "Hey there, no worries, take it easy, okay? We ain't here to hurt you, even if you aren't what you appear to be. Even if you're really really not what you appear to be. Right, Evie? What? Evelyn snapped, so Rain gave her a meaningful look. Oh, yes. Yes. I'm a little thrown off here, Rain. This isn't what I expected. Where the hell is the other one? Rain winked at Evelyn, then turned back to the girl, improvising in real time as the plan disintegrated around us. Short for January, then, she asked. Just Jan, said Jan. What you doing here, Jan? Rain pressed, beaming with enough confidence to peel the most wretched heart out of the darkest hole. Jan's throat bobbed with another visible swallow, her eyes darting between us. I tried to imagine what she saw. She shook her head as if confused. I wasn't. I've been here for 2 weeks. 3. I don't know you, I think. Are you here to take me back to my parents? Her voice was delicate and light, her accent posh and refined. Whoever she was, she probably didn't belong in Sherrowford. Rain raised her eyebrows and shared a look with the rest of us. I bit my lip. Maybe, Rain said. Depends if you want to go back or not. We're not here to hurt you, Evelyn finally began, her wheels locking back onto the plan once more, into the practiced lines I'd listened to her recite last night. We're here to talk. The excess of caution is for our safety, but you haven't threatened us or laid any traps, and we are not going to hurt you. Understand? You followed my daughter a few days ago. She indicated Preem with a little nod. I want to know who you are and what you're doing in my city. Evelyn took a deep breath, diplomacy successfully delivered. Jan's wide blue eyes stared back at her, framed by those messy dark locks. She blinked, swallowed, lips parted in frozen confusion. I don't understand, she said. She's not a kid, I murmured, confused as to why I felt that way. She's our age, isn't she? Good afternoon, Jan, Preem intoned, leaning down slightly so she was eye level with the girl on the bed. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. Nice to meet you. Jan swallowed hard again, throat audibly dry. Preem did not attempt to smile. Probably for the best. January. Right, Evelyn went on, struggling to find the right words. We were off track again. Right. Where's your friend? We know there's 2 of you. Or she was, what, your captor? I'm sorry, I don't. Jan started shaking her head, looking like she wanted to bury her face in the pillow clutched to her front. Her voice was shaking and quivering, tears gathering in those impossible eyes. You mean the lady I was with? I don't know who she is, I don't even have her name. The others, the ones with the old man, they put me in her care. You're not from him, are you? Evelyn frowned like she was turning to stone. We're not with any old man. Where's the zombie? She left the room before I saw you from the window. Jan swallowed to suppress a growing stammer. It was like she knew you were coming. I'm sorry. Shit, Rain hissed, glancing at the door. Who are you? Evelyn demanded. Who's the lady you were with? What are you doing in my city? I need you to answer. Hey, it's okay, Rain started to murmur, soft and reassuring, but we were losing ground. This was all going wrong. Maybe we should just get her out of here. Twill suggested. Why was nobody commenting on her eyes? Those eyes were like nothing I'd ever seen before, a shifting blue like the underside of the sea, or gemstones in flame. People didn't possess eyes like that. Set in Jan's neat, pale, terrified face were the most beautiful eyes I'd ever seen, and I didn't think that in some romantic or erotic sense. Her eyes were aesthetic marvels, a storm-tossed sky lit by the blink of a supernova. What was I looking at? As Evelyn raised her voice and Jan actually squeaked in fear, I forced myself to look away from those eyes. Something was wrong here. My mind automatically searched for clues among the contents of the room, the clothes in the bags, the two books visible poking from the mess. I turned my head to catch the titles on the pair of paperbacks, but one of them was in Chinese and the other in Russian. Without thinking, one of my tentacles uncurled towards the books, to pick one up and take a look. Jan's impossibly beautiful eyes flickered in my peripheral vision. I looked back at her and caught the moment. Just a split second. Then she was looking elsewhere again. "We're not here to hurt you or kidnap you or do anything to you, in fact," Evelyn was saying, her voice rising with frustration. "We are trying to make contact without violence, for once. So call your friend or tell us where she is or—" "Twill," I said, loud and clear, the tone of my voice cutting across Evelyn losing control. "Twill, step away from her." "Eh?" Twill frowned at me, but she did as I said. "Preem, you too," I said. "Away from the bed. Please. Heather." Evelyn grunted at me, but Preem was already obeying my request. Rain went very still and ready. Jan stared at me, seemingly uncomprehending, white as a sheet. Her lower lip trembled. "You could see my tentacle just now," I said. "Couldn't you?" "Oh damn," Twill hissed. Jan blinked at me, then glanced at the others, doing a very good impression of a confused and scared young woman who had no idea what this crazy person was talking about. Her throat bobbed and her mouth hung open. A trapped little mouse, surrounded by big scary predators in a dirty and dark place. I had to steel myself for unkindness, because everything about her made me want to scoop her up and whisk her off to safety. "I saw your eyes follow the tip," I said. "You need to be honest and tell us what you are, because there's only certain types of things that can see my tentacles. And we still won't hurt you, not if you're not trying to hurt us." "What are you, Jan?" But little Jan shook her head, bewildered and wide-eyed. I don't understand," she squeezed out. "Tentacles." Evelyn sighed. "She's lying?" Rain asked me. But I didn't answer, I just stared at Jan, watching her eyes. Had I been mistaken? Uncertain, Preem intoned. She hadn't caught the look either. "Only one thing for it," I said. Heart in my mouth, I uncoiled one of my tentacles again and reached across the empty gap between us. I inched the tentacle slowly towards Jan's face, coming at her from the side, waiting for the flicker of her eyes. She watched us instead, seemingly oblivious to the tentacle extending towards her, seeking an explanation for what was going on, her chest rising and falling with rapid and increasing panic as the silence stretched out. I am sorry," she blurted out. "I don't know what you're." 4 inches from the soft skin of her cheek. "Talking about." An inch. No response. "Was taken from my parents 3 weeks ago. They keep moving me, I don't even know where I am." I touched her cheek with the tip of my tentacle. Cool and soft. I pressed gently, just hard enough to dimple the skin. She froze, not in shock and horror at an unexpected touch, but with the mild surprise of a gambler who had wagered on the wrong horse. Jan moved her face away from my tentacle with a sigh. "Ah shit," said Twill, making wolf claws of both hands with a flicker wisp of spirit matter. Rain raised her gun and pointed it directly at Jan's head. Evelyn grit her teeth and went pale, unable to spare a hand to cling to me, but pressing against my side all the same. Preem didn't move. Jan sighed again and stretched out her legs so they hung over the side of the bed, flexing her feet. She let the pillow flop down into her lap. "You do have to admit," she said, voice a delicate curl, no less girlish but without the lost lamb bleat, "I almost had you with that stupid act." "Almost," Rain said, with a grudging smirk of respect. "Not bad." "Who and what are you?" Evelyn demanded through her teeth. "You can see my tentacles," I repeated. "Which means you're what?" Jan nodded politely to me in defeat, blinking thick dark eyelashes. I assumed they were an illusion, so I stayed still when I should have flinched. That's some very serious work you've had done there, miss. Thank you, I said. I've tried very hard. Jan raised her eyebrows. You did it to yourself. Interesting. You need to answer our questions, Evelyn said, tight and angry, and call your friend out from hiding. Right now. I don't really like being threatened. Jan said, pulling a face. Are you in charge? Because I would really appreciate it if that one there, she gestured at Rain, would stop pointing a gun at me. Please. Like, bullets are a major weakness of mine. Not a chance, Rain murmured. Sorry. We had to think quickly here, but I couldn't figure out what to make of Jan, whatever she was. This was nothing like the previous times we'd seen mages disguise themselves as other people. There was an obvious contrast between Jan's physical size, her apparent youth, and her attitude of cool confidence in the face of actual fear because she was afraid. Quite a bit. She did not read as some ancient thing curled up like a cancer in the body of a young girl, and possessed none of the animalistic strangeness or mechanical precision that I'd seen in demon hosts. What she seemed like was a very confident teenage girl with a serious talent for acting. Abyssal instincts agreed. I felt no desire at all to launch myself across the room and pull her brain out before she could hurt my friends. But what about those eyes? Oh well, Jan sighed, pulling a pained smile. I hope for my sake your trigger discipline is better than your ability to read liars. Absolutely, Rain replied, stock still, finger most certainly not inside the trigger guard. Jan reached up toward her own face to tuck a stray lock of hair behind one ear. Rain snapped out something about keeping her hands where we could see them, but it was already too late. Her act had disarmed us so competently and we were yet to complete the gear shift. In the split second Jan's fingers were next to her own ear, they seemed to slip over each other, each finger vanishing and reappearing from sight in rapid succession, so quickly that one couldn't be sure if the effect was a trick of the light. Her fingers reappeared from nowhere holding a tiny, compact handgun, pulled from thin air. I hadn't known guns came in such small sizes. It was also pink. Drop that right now, Rain was saying all of a sudden, low and serious. Twill was already growling and stepping in front of the rest of us, ready to rip the gun straight from the girl's hand. Preem had stepped neatly in front of Evelyn before we'd even registered the weapon. Ah, Jan went, smiling that subtle little smile even as sweat rolled down her forehead. She waved the gun, but not at us, wagging it like a finger. You're pointing your guns at me. I don't get to do the same. You've already concealed plenty, Rain said. I can take that right off you, you little shit, Twill growled. Put it down. Jan sighed, nodding politely. Slowly and carefully she placed the gun down on the bed next to her. Don't touch it, Evelyn snapped before anybody could move to scoop up the firearm. What? Jan asked. You think I would booby-trap my own last resort? Is that the sort of people I'm dealing with here? It's hardly your last resort, I piped up, mouth gone quite dry. If you can pull a gun from the air, you can produce other things too. Smart, Jan said. She nodded with a sweet smile, though she had to steady herself with a deep breath, bluffing just as hard as us. You have no idea what else I have up my sleeves. Literally. She did a little flourish with her hands, like a magician about to produce a card, which was exactly what jumped into the gap between the first and middle fingers of her right hand. She turned the playing card over to show us. Ha, Rain laughed. Ace of spades. Nice trick. Stop doing that, Evelyn snapped. Trust me, all of you, you with the gun, and the werewolf, and whatever you are, squid girl, and that. She nodded at Evelyn's bone wand, eyes widening a fraction. I am amply defended. We're in a standoff here, you haven't got the upper hand. We can do a lot of damage to each other in a very short space of time, I'm certain of that, so let's all take a deep breath. We weren't after an upper hand, Evelyn said. We want to talk. You followed my preem here. You followed one of us. I want to know what you're doing. I want to know who and what you are. And then we can all go our separate ways, Rain added in a purr, though she still held her pistol leveled with both hands. We just want to make sure you're not a threat. Jan laughed, a real laugh, a teenage girl's giggle. You know what? This is so absurd that I actually believe you. Certainly, why not? She leaned back on her hands and shrugged. A little pink tongue flickered out to wet her lips. When I saw you in the street I assumed you were going to put something straight through the window, so I was prepared for worse. But here you are. Talking. My goodness. Jan, Evelyn said, gently motioning Prem aside a pace or two. Jan what? Dutch name, right? Rain asked. Jan shrugged. Jan Martens. Evelyn frowned like she'd found excrement smeared all over the doormat. I'm not an idiot, nor was I born yesterday. Jan cringed. Worth a try, wasn't it? I'm sorry. I asked. It's a name from a story, Evelyn grunted. An obvious one. She's lying to us. Jan gave a very good show of looking like an outraged teenage girl. Which, maybe she actually was. Your city? She asked. Excuse me, but I don't see a crown on your head. Twill snorted, involuntarily. You know what I mean, Evelyn hissed. And last I checked, the mayor of Sherrowford was a gentleman in his 60s. So, not you. What is this, are we working on right of conquest here? Do I have to formally challenge you to be allowed within city limits? Is this why that giant slab of meat has been harassing us for like 2 weeks? Zheng, I sighed. She means Zheng. I'm sorry, Zheng does her own thing. She enjoyed fighting your friend? Jan rolled her eyes. Fair enough. I assume you sent this clown to follow us though, she nodded at Twill. And me? Twill stammered. Yes. Had to find where you were living, Evelyn said. You mean you knew I was there? Twill asked in a small, offended voice. Clown. Any unknown mage or associates in Sherrowford present an unacceptable risk to my friends and family, Evelyn rattled off. We're already in a conflict with one mage and I need to be absolutely sure you aren't working for him, whatever you are. Frankly, an unbound demon host turns up on the streets of Sherrowford, and I have to assume the worst. And you followed my daughter. She stamped with her walking stick, snarling those last few words. She's made of wood, Jan said. It's not every day you spot a person made of wood. I was interested. She nodded to Prem. Cool, by the way. Well done. I am fabulous, Prem intoned. Jan smiled, apparently delighted at this. Jan, I said. Listen to me very carefully, please. And you, what are you? She gestured at me with her eyes. I thought you were something very different for a moment, but... I need you to listen, I repeated, bringing the metaphorical cannon to bear. Jan blinked once. This isn't a standoff. I can reach out with one tentacle and touch you again unless you're very acrobatic indeed. Jan shrugged. What you see is mostly what you get. I nodded. Well then. If I can touch you, I can get rid of you, instantly. I can shunt you outside with a single thought. Do you know that term? Maybe you know it by a different name, but I think you know what I mean. And yes, in the confusion, you might get a shot off, you hurt one or two of us. Your zombie, whoever she is, might pop out of the wall and take one of us down. But you will be placed beyond recovery, the instant I touch you. Jan went quite still as I spoke. Her eyes searched the faces of my friends. She found no bluff. Okay. Where is this going? However, I went on, I am not a murderer by habit. We just want to make sure you're not a danger to us. Heather, Evelyn hissed, remember what I said about mages and overconfidence. I grunted. Jan stared back at me for a second, those huge beautiful eyes blinking in thought. All right, she sighed. I don't want to fight either, I'm not generally in the habit of murder. I'm a mage too. I'm in Sherrowford to do a job, for which I am being paid, by people who have nothing to do with this city and hopefully nothing to do with you. Tentacles, Preem intoned, pointing out the lie. Jan wasn't just a mage, she could see pneumosomatic flesh. But Jan blinked, not following. She didn't understand. Rain blew out a pft sound. All a mistake, hey. A job? Evelyn said, skeptical to the point of disgust. What do you mean, a job? What's the job? Twill asked. Well, that's where you lot come in. Jan pulled an anxious smile. I came to Sherrowford to do a job, then discovered the job was unnecessary. But in the process of discovering, I found another group of people who would pay me to do a different job. Involving you, all of you. Which I was very much inclined to take, because you were already following me around or, Zheng was, my mistake. And if I could get you all in one place, that would make it possible to finish the first job too. And everybody likes to get paid twice. Tension tightened our little group, all but Preem. Evelyn's frown turned stormy. Twill shook her head and growled. What job? Evelyn hissed. Who are you working for? Scotta be Eddie boy, Rain said. Yeah, who else would give a shit? Twill said. Now he's got this mercenary working for him. Contractor. Jan said, huffing with squinting disbelief, very much the put-out little madam. Mercenaries generally fight wars. Do I look like I'm remotely suitable to fight a war? Looks can be deceiving, I said softly, still struggling against a sudden urge to wrap a tentacle around her throat. Those eyes met mine with a private understanding. I have less than zero interest in your turf war, Jan said. And I'm not even that interested in any of you, not really. Except you, Squiddy, perhaps. Wouldn't mind swapping notes on yourself. And Preem, was it? Preem, said Preem. You're quite a marvel. Jan smiled at her with lip-biting, girlish approval. And I think you know that, too. I am all my mother's love, Preem said. Mother? Jan hitched an eyebrow, then glanced at Evelyn. Oh. Oh. When you said, daughter, I thought that was cover. You really treat her as. Jan considered for a moment, then nodded, something different about her attitude in the way she met Evelyn's eyes. I'm working for a group whose name I am not at liberty to divulge, she said with all the delicacy of a lady turning down a dance at a ball. Oh, for, Evelyn hissed. You're gonna have to do better than that, Rain said. But. Jan went on, huffing at our impatience, raising a finger. I can tell you what I was sent to do. I'm to track down everyone and anyone who has been involved with one Nathan Sterling Hobbs. Badger, I blurted out. That's Badger's real name. Including whoever put him in the hospital, she carried on with an extra smile in her voice, and verify that they are free of certain contaminants. Contaminants, Evelyn deadpanned. Don't worry, Jan said. You lot are far too coherent and sane to be what I'm looking for. But I'm still going to have to check you. Like hell you are, Twill grunted. Yeah, what she said, Rain agreed. Jan shook her head. You don't understand. A person turns up in a hospital, anywhere in Britain, with a mysterious self-inflicted trepanation wound. It wasn't self-inflicted, I said. Heather, Evelyn hissed through her teeth. Yeah, maybe don't. Twill suggested. It's all right, I said, staring at January. She was staring back with sudden and polite interest, eyes like jewels dropped into a fire. Something isn't right here. Wires have gotten crossed, somehow. We need to clear it up. I put that hole in Nathan's head. Oh dear, Jan sighed. She wet her lips and swallowed, fear inching back. And why did you do that? To save his life from something that was in his head. Those are not the words I need to hear, Jan said. Look, I was trying to say, a person turns up in any hospital, anywhere in Britain, with a mysterious self-inflicted trepanation wound and a certain group of people sit up and take notice. They want to make sure they don't have to break out the tinfoil hats and the car bombs. The car bombs? Twill spluttered. How do you know what happened to him? I asked. It was in the newspapers, Jan said. The local ones. And I didn't find out about it, my current employers did. But they're mostly a bunch of cowards. So that's why I'm here, to rule out a certain problem. And if I don't get back to them eventually, they'll come after you themselves. And not with magic. Her eyes alighted on Rain's handgun. Though from the looks of it, you might be prepared for that, too. We'd rather avoid that kind of thing, thanks all the same, Rain said. Jan pulled another one of those awkward teenage smiles, one that said she knew she was in a lot of trouble, and was not going to get out of it. Well, that means I need to take a little peek inside all of your heads.